I live alone in a little house in a big city. Kind of a rough around the edges neighborhood, but I lived in the area most of my life, and my block is tight-knit in spite of half of it being vacant or abandoned. It's also a city that, like many others, tragically has a lot of folks living out of cars and RVs, trying to eke out an existence. So I shouldn't have been too surprised when, back in October last year, I got a text from a neighbor. You might want to take a look out your back window. About 10 feet away was an enormous 40-foot motorhome in the dead-end alley, sitting right on the edge of the small cliff that is my unfenced backyard. Having lived in urban areas my whole life, I'm no stranger to odd things happening immediately outside my window, but this did feel a little bit more intrusive than living in a ground floor apartment. No thanks to my back window being my bathroom window. It sat there for a few weeks without anyone paying much mind. A few neighbors speculated it might have been someone working on a couple demolition and construction projects in the neighborhood. A supervisor from out of town, perhaps. Whoever it was, I didn't really mind as long as there wasn't any mess, though I was slightly worried a wrong move would end with someone or the whole vehicle rolling off the retaining wall and potentially crashing through my wall. Of course, there was the small fact that half the block now couldn't access the alley. My city is very particular about removing vehicles if someone is potentially living in them, and after a few roundabout calls to the parking department, I and my neighbors were told that we needed some evidence they were a hazard or abandoned. So I grabbed a cheap webcam off Amazon and popped it in my window and then went on with my life. About a week later, after some friends over for dinner had left, I thought I'd check and see if the camera had picked up anything. I didn't sleep for the next few nights. Like clockwork, every night around midnight, the lights in the RV would flick on in the otherwise pitch black night. A couple of cars would pull up behind and the occupants would unload several very full garbage bags into the RV. Then these shadowy figures would creep down the yard of the vacant house next door, into mine, and methodically circle my house, shining flashlights in each window. Cars would come and go all night until about 5 a.m. Then all was business as usual during daylight hours. It's worth mentioning that my house is essentially a studio apartment on top of a garage, built into a slope. My bed is about 10 feet from those windows. Also worth mentioning, my neighborhood had an alarming rash of about 20 armed home invasions the summer before, or the arson on an occupied house across the street a few months earlier. Vulnerable was an understatement of how I felt. I ended up moving most of my furniture around my bed as a makeshift barricade. I called 911. They were a bit incredulous. Nothing was actively happening as I called. This wasn't an emergency. I can call the non-emergency line in the morning if I want to speak to an officer or detective. The next morning, I felt it was prudent to bring any yard tools that would make a tempting window breaker and double-check the back porch and security flood had working bulbs. And just my luck, I managed to completely break both fixtures in the process. Almost immediately as I walked out my back door, the RV's door swung open, and a man and woman stepped out. They were dressed in t-shirts and shorts despite the 39-degree weather and looked a bit like zombies. I waved. They didn't. They stared past me. I quickly retreated back inside to keep an eye remotely, but not before noticing something even more startling. The RV had about 6 security cameras mounted on it, 3 of which were trained on my back door. I was watching them, they were watching me. After a day or two more of this, I had become fully nocturnal, leaving all the lights blazing all night, and I started to feel like I was losing my mind. This was both mostly benign and deeply unsettling. Texting friends and family in hopes of reassurance. Well, didn't do much. They're probably just trying to find a quiet place away from the encampments. Maybe they work a night shift. If you were living on the streets, wouldn't you want a security camera? I mean, you have one on your house. Okay, maybe I was being paranoid. My neighbors were mostly preoccupied with the alley being blocked and subsequent missed deliveries. And it's not like the city was going to do much anyways. The cars kept coming and going all night. The people with flashlights stayed just outside the edge of my yard, but I would catch the occasional flash through the window. After being reluctant to leave the house, and my cat alone, I had to leave for an in-person work meeting. While I was gone, my camera pinged me about activity. The RV folks had set up stakes around my property and were wrapping yellow caution tape around my yard and across the alley, and had set up a barricade of traffic cones around their vehicle. This was just getting weird. By this point, a few of us on the block started a group text to keep tabs on things. One neighbor a few houses down caught the female half of this duo in her backyard with a chainsaw, climbing their oak tree in broad daylight. They confronted her and she gave the same treatment as me. A mute 1,000-yard stare. That neighbor called it in, and I watched a few officers poke around for a minute, clearly puzzled by the barricades and tape. I thought there might be some imminent resolution. They then booked it back to their squad and took off with the lights and sirens. There was a shooting a few blocks over. I assumed they got called too. Another night goes by, punctuated by the RV's alarm going off every couple of hours and the engine revving menacingly, though nothing out of the ordinary. At least this ordinary. I take my mid-morning nap I've become accustomed to over the past week, only to be woken by the loud, angry yelling. I pull up the camera feed. Out back is another neighbor, the goofy dad, cum ex-naval officer, venting his frustrations to a police officer, who's banging the RV door with a baton, demanding the occupants come out. There's a brand new sports car parked behind, one that I'd barely make out on my cheap camera's night vision. I carefully left out the front so as not to be conspicuous, and circled up to the mouth of the alley to speak with the officer and explained my story in a near stream of consciousness ramble. Did you see them leave? Nope. I played back the camera. The sports car showed up around 5:30 a.m. and nobody had left since. He said the car was too new to have a current registration and the RV was registered to a deceased person 4 counties away. Suspicious, but nothing outright criminal, but he'd ticket them with a 24-hour tow notice. As he was typing up the ticket, the sports car came barreling down the alley in reverse, nearly plowing into the cruiser, and I was told very sternly to leave immediately. I ran home and pulled up a police scanner feed to try and glean some information. They were calling for a gang officer, a domestic violence unit, the Vice Squad, and CSI. So my gut feeling wasn't too far off the mark. Later that night, the officer called me asking to send the entirety of my footage. I asked if there was anything he could divulge about what happened. I can't tell you much, but this was a bad dude and he's going away. We towed the car as evidence, but we'll have to wait until morning to get a big enough truck to move the RV. To say I slept well that night was an understatement, but that calm was shattered quite literally early the next morning as I heard glass breaking outside. 3 masked men were breaking into the RV with crowbars. One was up on a ladder, sawing through the roof with an angle grinder. I frantically called 911, struggling to explain the context of what was going on. Once again met with a verbal eye roll from the call taker. Is it your RV? No. Sir, you can't report a stolen vehicle that isn't yours. I hung up and tried again, hoping to get someone else on the other end. We have a wrecker dispatched to that location. Are you sure these aren't the new tow operators? Sure enough, just as these guys managed to get the RV started, the tow truck was coming around the corner. They booked it so fast it ripped up the gravel, and it's a miracle it didn't end up through someone's wall. Well, whatever. The absolute freaking heck happened is seemingly over. Seemingly. Again, seemingly. I suppose this is an epilogue of sorts and by far the most unsettling part of this story. I quickly upgraded my crappy camera to a couple commercial grade ones with smart object detection, synchronized floodlights and automatic sirens, hoping I would rest easy. No, it was going off all of the time, at least once or twice a week for over a month. The cameras caught creeps stalking around my backyard and windows with flashlights. There were also plenty of other times cars were idling with the lights off in the alley for unsettlingly long periods. The one I can't shake was the guy at 3 a.m. slowly making his way up the alley in a low crouch, taking a long pause directly behind my house, and then booking it towards my door full speed. Or the guy that managed to get past the camera, and I came face to face with his ugly mug pressed up against my kitchen window around midnight. At least the alarms did their job. Every one of these guys took off once lit up, like a stadium with sirens blaring. For some comic relief, that last guy tried to hop a retaining wall and face planted on the other side. Of course, again, friends and family had some not so reassuring platitudes. Maybe it was somebody looking for a lost dog, or somebody got lost in the alley, or maybe this just always happened before I had lights and cameras. And shaking what little hope I had in law enforcement, the cops, if they showed up at all, were at least an hour late. But here's the real kicker. I filed a public request for the arrest and case report and got it back months later. Turns out my neighbor in the RV had kidnapped his ex-girlfriend and was likely trafficking her. She'd in fact called 911 but didn't know the neighborhood, and the cops were looking for them in a different part of town. He had a lengthy rap sheet for felony burglary, fraud, and firearms charges. An acquaintance of his was interviewed by detectives and said the RV was packed to the gills with guns and improvised weapons, and this guy told this witness that he would come back and kill whoever sent him back to jail. And right at the bottom, in all caps, was my name and address, but phone number redacted, listed as reporting party and complainant. The cops searched the sports car and found nothing of note. The RV, as you recall, was apparently stolen before they could even get a valid warrant. The ex fled during the arrest, as I saw on camera, and was never heard from again. The DA dropped the case and this guy was released from jail 48 hours later. It's been about 6 months since my last visitor at night. There hasn't been a whole lot of peace of mind before I turn in for the night. It's slowly fading, but I can't say I'm not a little on edge after dark, even in my own home. My house is now completely lit up 360 degrees. I put various dents or spiky plantings around my windows and the perimeter, and I sleep with a rifle next to my bed. But fortunately, new folks have moved into the vacant houses on either side of me, and they also seem like good people. I just don't know if I have the heart to tell them all what went down. "19 female. The first day I attended class, Alex asked me out. Alex was over 300 pounds, and shallow as it may be, I was completely uninterested in him and turned him down as politely as possible. This was not acceptable to Alex, who believed all women 20 years of age or older were either taken or defective, and he required a 19-year-old girlfriend to avoid forever aloneness. Alex made friends with my awful roommate Dirk, who he hated, purely in order to see me every day. He constantly asked me out, and every time I turned him down, I felt disgusted with myself. I was shooting down an otherwise perfectly sweet kid based on what I thought was solely a physical trait. Now, I know that I was probably also picking up on the fact that Alex was not coloring with a full box of crayons. Between familiarity with his presence and my own conviction that I was at risk of becoming a terrible human being, I finally accepted a date. He tanked the date. I mean full on. He would not say a word to me for 3.5 hours until we missed the actual date itself, ending in me walking out. The next day, he was back at my apartment begging for a second chance, but I turned him down again. I told him his behavior said he wasn't as interested as he claimed. Alex set about proving me wrong. Every day there he was. How's your day? What's your favorite memory? Tell me something about yourself. I should have identified this as creepy, but I still thought he was just Dirk's friend, and most of the time, Dirk was snorting aerosolized cheese and generally being a terrible conversationalist. Alex was actually gathering information. From me, from Dirk and my friends, from my teachers. Why? To construct a whole new persona to appeal to me. I knew nothing about him until the day I knew everything about him. Everything was a lie, and those lies sounded amazing. The second date went fantastically, and we began dating exclusively. This drove Dirk into violent lunacy. Alex's web of lies. We were dating 3 weeks when Dirk tried to cut my brake line. Alex, of course, offered to let me live with him. He had a great job and was paying for a whole apartment by himself, he claimed. I could finish paying off my half of the lease with my roommate and just help Alex with utilities until I had more money. I gratefully moved in and quickly began uncovering Alex's lies. Some were truly asinine. Like when I discovered that the stuffed pasta and sauce he'd spent all day making from scratch for me were actually Bertolli. That was especially weird because Alex was a fantastic chef and could have actually cooked something from scratch to impress me. Some were not so stupid, like the way he didn't in fact have a job. Alex's parents were paying for everything and they hadn't been intending to. They'd made a deal with him. They would pay for college until he graduated. For the first year-long lease, they would pay for half of his rent, but he was to immediately get a roommate or a job, and once the lease was up, he would be responsible for his own room and board. Yes, they were rich. As I moved in, he called them to brag. Their reaction was not what he expected. "So you got a roommate? I guess we'll only be helping you with half the rent then." He came clean about his job, claiming he thought I'd think less of him if I knew his parents were paying the bills. He told me they had some unexpected financial troubles and I needed to pick up half the rent. I was now paying for half my former roommate's rent and half of Alex's, but I just thought it was some bad luck, not his fault. Then of course my lease with Alex was up, and when we renewed, his parents unexpectedly cut him off and I was paying for everything. More bad luck, he assured me. I wouldn't find out about his deal with his parents for years. Alex stalks other women. He met a girl named Amy online in a role-playing game we played together. From the moment he met her, he refused to game with me. Soon, he was refusing to speak to me. I couldn't even take him out to a movie. He needed to be home at his computer, and he needed all of his attention free in case Amy spoke to him. If she wasn't logged in, he was frantically e-stalking her, saving all the information off her social media sites and grilling her friends for more details. Soon, he only reacted to me to negatively compare me to Amy. "Meatloaf? Amy made her boyfriend steak today," or "Amy would look better in that bathing suit than you," or "Amy just dyed her hair. You never dye your hair." He refused to admit that he had feelings for Amy, so I asked to meet her, in-game hoping that my presence would temper the situation a little bit. He fought me over it, but I insisted that if she was, as he claimed, just a friend, he shouldn't care if I met her. "Fine," he said, "but you need to play along." With what, you may be asking yourself? With the fact that he told her that he was a straight woman and I was his roommate. Also, that he was a lawyer, and that I was in law school, and that he was on and off dating a med student, and that we had a dog. The list kept going. I asked him why he told this woman so many lies. Why? Because in his research of her, he determined that this persona would make her trust him the most. And you need a lot of trust to have in-game hot lesbian sex apparently, with someone who is definitely not secretly a dude. I looked at this new character and saw a skinny little buxom lingerie-clad woman. I was tired of him ignoring me. He could still play the game, but he had to get back on his dude character and play it with me. He whined but switched tunes. However, through the entire quest, he was silently tapping away, refusing to speak to me. Then Amy showed up. "What the heck is this?" I demand. "I needed someone to talk to," he cried. Alexandra?" Amy asked. "Why are you on a boy character?" "Oh, because my roommate was so sick of being hit on by horny dudes, she asked me to escort her around for a while," he replied. I rage quit. The next day after I returned from work, both our accounts had been cancelled and our games uninstalled. He never mentioned Amy again. I never saw another stalking play out to that degree, but there would be many times he'd completely check out and refuse to leave his desk, compare me to strange women, randomly cancel game subscriptions, and exhibit other suspicious behavior. The one true human rears his fat head. Alex, despite his foibles, skated just shy of being worth breaking up with for 2 years. I think he was really trying to suppress his entitled behavior out of fear of loneliness, but he eventually began to revert. He'd always been jealous of my time, but soon he began actively alienating me from my friends. He would try to convince me that they were bad influences or go behind my back to start fights between us. He would physically bar me from seeing them by suddenly needing the car, feigning an illness, or scheduling a date at the same time, and asking me who was more important to me. Soon, I lost all actual perspective on the state of the relationship, pared down to nothing but people who insisted that Alex was the best thing for me. He began to feel entitled to me and my support and gradually stopped putting any effort into the relationship. Despite my lack of perspective, I wasn't completely blind and began to question what was happening. He convinced me that the degeneration of our relationship was my fault, that I was the one not treating him as he deserved, and that he was beginning to doubt I loved him anymore at all. I asked him what I could do, and he responded with a veritable laundry list of demands. He needed me to buy him the new video games as they came out, take him out on more dates, lose more weight, wear padded bras and save for a boob job, wear nothing but designer suits or sexy costumes, sleep in lingerie, become bisexual, and treat him to threesomes. Alex was a big fan of lists of crazy things. The more demands I refused, the more hostile and bitter he became. His soulmate would do these things for him, therefore I wasn't his soulmate. But now we were 21 and all the decent women were taken, and it was my fault that I had cheated him out of his soulmate. She was with someone else now, and he was stuck with me. The only option he saw was bullying me into becoming his perfect mate. Thus began years of gaslighting, lectures, and withholding affection, while he and all of his friends convinced me I couldn't live without him. One day, Alex announced that our faltering relationship would be fixed if we moved so he could attend a trendy school where he would finally earn his degree. I asked if his parents were alright with paying for this much more expensive school, but he assured me that they had spoken and were very supportive. And by that, he meant that 4 years ago, they agreed to pay for the associate's degree he still hadn't earned. So we moved. I transferred jobs and he enrolled in this new school. Then he told his parents for the first time and asked for $15,000. They cut him off. The breakup. Alex took out a bunch of loans and went to school anyway, where he met Madeline, and promptly became obsessed with her. This was a problem because his previous fixations were all women on the internet he didn't have access to. Now the only thing standing between him and sweet sextings with the object of his obsession was that she didn't want to be another woman. And that was of course also my fault. His bitterness toward me became overwhelming. Everything started a fight, down to flipping light switches and seeing people in hats. I told him that I really couldn't handle all the fighting, and if we didn't do something about it, the relationship wouldn't survive. He immediately blurted out that we were breaking up, and it was my fault for bringing up such a serious topic when relationships were supposed to be fun. He ran off to Madeline's apartment before I could get a word in. When I tried to move out, he said that if I left and stopped paying the lease, he would default on rent and ruin my credit, so I just moved to the couch and waited out the lease. I would habitually wake up to him licking me. Leave me alone. No. We should do it right now. No. You want it. I can tell you want it by the way you're moving. You're just saying no. The way I was moving was otherwise known as laying on the couch breathing, but going entirely stiff. Now you're just faking it. That doesn't count. You still want it. He insisted, slurping his tongue across my face. Seductively, apparently. I generally just had to wake up and leave for work early to avoid a tongue bath. He was really bad at kissing. Why aren't we doing it? He demanded one day. I told him, confused, that it was because we broke up. He said that I owed it to him. See, because I'd been nice to him during our relationship, I'd led him to believe that I would continue doing it with him if we broke up. I'd also lead him to believe that he was desirable and would be drowning in poon if only he were single. If he'd somehow known that he was 350 pounds or that running out on me might hinder his access to me naked, he never would have broken up with me. It was my fault. He hadn't had sex since he left me. The lease was almost up and Alex was suddenly interested in patching things up. He told me that although his soulmate was out there somewhere, she'd been taken while I was dating him, so he was willing to settle for me. That didn't work. He told me that he had misjudged how much he would miss sex and gifts. That didn't work either. He gave me a giant sunflower and apologized. I faltered. 1. This wasn't a lame monotone apology claiming that whatever he did, he would try not to do that anymore. He actually itemized all the things he'd done that had hurt me, demonstrated that he understood why I'd been hurt by his actions, and admitted he's done them for selfish reasons. 2. Giant sunflowers are magical and they make me feel like a tiny sparkly pixie. I said I would consider taking him back if he admitted to all the lies he'd told me over the last 5 years. This is when I learned pretty much all of the information here. The deal he made with his parents, the fact that he completely made up his past to attract me, and other major lies. He promised to change and be the boyfriend I deserved. Idiotically, I took him back. He made a huge gesture to get our relationship back on track, so I did too. I put him back on the lease and immediately found out I'd been played. He reverted back, claiming that he'd made an effort to be my perfect boyfriend, but I hadn't tried to be his perfect girlfriend. Because why wasn't I bisexual yet? Why hadn't I gotten a boob job? And why wasn't he having a threesome right now? If I wasn't going to make an effort, neither was he. He went right back to picking fights about people and hats and demanding I fulfill his insane list of desires. I was pretty much emotionally busted at this point. Alex was just going to trick and lie to me to get whatever he wanted, and I was stuck with him forever. Maybe that's what I deserved. At about that time, my old friend Vincent contacted me, saying he'd be in town and asking me if I wanted to hang out. I asked Alex if I could, and he replied that of course I could see my friends. It wasn't like he was controlling or anything. Alex obviously began slandering Vincent and making it difficult to see him, but I managed to make it anyway. While I was hanging out with Vincent and his friends, Alex began blowing up my phone. He'd been so upset by my absence that he ate so much that he got sick, drank too much, and gave himself a bad perm. He read that. He reduced me to tears on the phone, demanding an apology for every stupid, self-destructive thing he'd done. When Alex finally hung up on me, I apologized to Vincent for ruining the get-together. He just said, "You don't have to be sorry." I just kind of blinked at him, went home, and broke up with Alex. I've been married to Vincent for 5 years. Hello everyone, this happened last winter. If this story is misplaced, I'll move it, but I think it will fit this subreddit. So I'll start by giving you a little bit of background. I am, like most girls here, a really short, skinny girl. I attend school in a pretty well-off neighborhood, but it's really on the border zone. So you have the middle-high class on one side of the avenue and the extremely poor people on the other. A few other friends and I usually wait for the bus on the poor side of the avenue, and I think I should mention that the bus stop is right after the intersection of another avenue, so the red light lasts for a good minute. Luckily, this time I was with Anne. Now, we were waiting and chatting for a bit, and we saw this dude coming. He looked like he was high, and he was sweating even though it was a really cold winter day. He had dirt on his knees and elbows and a glassy look in his eyes. He stops walking and asks me what the time is. I check and told him it's 1:45, as politely as I could. I've been taught that if you can avoid conflict, it's better to do so in the most polite way possible so that you don't upset people. He stops and stares at me for a good 30 seconds and tells me that I have a beautiful set of eyes, I have hazel eyes, and people usually compliment them. I usually grow really awkward at compliments on my eyes because I have trichotillomania, and in consequence have no eyelashes. So I turn my back and try to make conversation with my friend. He walks right up to her and also greets her with a kiss on the cheek and says something about her piercing blue eyes. Then he breaks off into a weird speech. Look, girls, I am simply looking for something that belongs to me. At this point, I thought he was going to rob us, but it turned out to be something creepy. A girl with beautiful light-colored eyes that belongs to me. And I was thinking that maybe you two could come with me, or I could join you wherever you are going. While we were at it, where are you going? We were actually going back to her place to revise for an exam. Now, I look at her quickly but intensely and answer while looking at her. We're going shopping. She got my not-so-subtle hint and agreed. He then said that he would take us shopping. I checked to see if the bus was about to arrive, And it was. Until the damn red light brought it to a halt. Shit. My friend looks when she sees me look away, and he says something really chilling. You know, it's going to be a long time until that bus arrives. And he puts one of his arms around my waist. Now, I couldn't be polite anymore. I pulled away from him. I honestly thought it would be harder, but he apparently didn't see it coming, and onto the avenue and dragged Anne with me, all the while looking at the creep to check if he would try anything. The creep smiled right at us and kept talking about how beautiful our eyes were, how he just wanted to be with one of us, or if he was lucky, both, and similar stuff. Then the bus started coming towards us, and we immediately got in. The creep did not follow us, and Anne scolded me for talking to a strange-looking stranger. I worked in a porn store from 2002 to 2006. It was a small, somewhat poorly run and locally owned. There were two in town, both closed down now, that were owned by the same people. I worked at both of them, depending on where they needed me. It was an easy job. I was in college for the majority of the time I worked there. I pretty much got paid to sit around, watch TV, play around on the internet, do my homework, and occasionally ring up a customer. We were never busy, and we always worked alone. Aside from the creeps and the one time I got robbed, it was a good time. I could have my friends come and hang out with me, as long as they weren't behind the counter. After I met my then boyfriend / now husband, he also got hired, and so we would just hang out with each other at the shop if we didn't have other obligations. The store was set up so that when customers walked in, they were in the main room with the counter, which also had novelty items. Lube, toys, cards, books. If they went to the room on their right, they would be in the movie room. The room on their left had lingerie, stripper clothes, and shoes. Both rooms had cameras to prevent shoplifting. For this particular incident, I was alone in the store. A clearly Amish man walked in with another guy. The other guy hung around in the doorway for a bit and then walked back outside. The Amish guy was probably in his 50s. Very short, stocky, and had graying hair. He identified himself as part of the Amish community and said that the other guy was his driver. He then said something to me about not telling the other guy what he was buying if he came back in. I just laughed it off and tried to busy myself with something else. I tried to have as little communication with customers as possible unless they were non-creepy regulars, because I didn't want to give off even a hint of interest. He then went into the movie room for a bit. He came back empty-handed and came up to the counter. He asked if we had lemon-lime flavored Spanish fly. I told him that we did not have that flavor, but we did have some Spanish fly. He told me that the Amish girls really liked lemon-lime flavored stuff, so he uses that in their drinks. Then he told me that it works really well. At this point, I'm giving all the signals of disinterest in hopes that he will shut up and move on. But he didn't. He continued stating that he thinks it's really funny when he gets all these women pregnant and their husbands think that it's their child. I have no idea how he would know if he was really the father of those children or not, and I certainly didn't ask. Then he propositioned to me for sex. You are a pretty young girl. Would you like to make $500? I declined. Well, do you have any friends that would like to make $500? No, sorry. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm good. His focus then returned to the lemon-lime Spanish fly. He told me he was desperate for it. I was desperate myself to get him out of the store. I told him that maybe they had some at our other store across town. Luckily, the trick worked and he left without incident. And thankfully, I never saw him again. Many years ago, when we were young and stupid and full of idealistic optimism and newly married and working shitty mall jobs, my husband and I had a friend in need. He was my husband's co-worker, Jack. Jack was about 8 years older than us and was in the middle of a messy breakup with not one boyfriend, but two. A sort of package deal. They all lived together. He was being kicked out and he needed somewhere to move in a hurry. Our lease was up soon and he offered to pay half the rent if we upgraded to a 2-bedroom and let him move in with us. It seemed like a sensible enough plan. We liked Jack and felt sorry for him. In addition to his relationship ending badly, he had been through a lot in his life. There was the kind of standard stuff, like growing up in a homophobic environment, having to join the army to get an education, and dealing with DADT, and the fact that he was working a shitty mall job and pushing 30. But there were also other tragedies in his past, and we felt protective of him. He had been addicted to drugs and had gone through recovery 10 years before after dropping out of art school. He had been in an abusive relationship with the guy who had shot at him. He had depression and took an array of prescriptions and had very shaky self-esteem. But there was one tragedy that towered over all of that. When he was in high school before he came out, he had a girlfriend, Steffi, who he had truly loved, his very best friend, and Steffi had gotten pregnant. But near her due date, she was in a terrible car crash and was rushed to the hospital. They were able to save the baby, but not her. Jack had raised his daughter Melissa the best he could. He joined the army to support her and get better employment prospects. Unfortunately, that meant he had to sign custody over when he was deployed. He signed it over to Steffi's parents. When he returned, they went to court and used the fact that he was gay against him and kept custody. Now, he had to pay hundreds in child support to them every month and only saw his daughter, who was at the time going on 10 or 11 years old, twice per year. Periodically, he would get a picture of her and show it off at work. She literally looked just like him, except female, of course, and she would write him letters about how much she missed him. It was just so sad and unjust. But tragic past aside, Jack was fun to hang out with, and I was looking forward to sharing space with him. We liked to do the usual stupid 20-something mall worker stuff, mostly revolving around drinking and going out and buying stuff we didn't need, and watching too much TV. He was a great conversationalist, a great listener, and even liked to cook. We were going to have a blast. We moved into the new place and everything was going well. It was awesome having to pay so much less in rent, and basically having a constant social hour at home. At first. The first problem came only a few weeks in. Jack never came home one weekend, even though he was supposed to meet us to go somewhere. When he finally called, he was crying. He had been so despondent about his breakup and everything. He said he had relapsed for the first time in 10 years and used cocaine. He assured us it would never happen again. He already felt terrible about it. I didn't know any technical details about drug addiction, but this unsettled me. Yet I figured that if it was really a one-time thing, he could pull himself together again. And for a few months, everything was back to normal and seemed fine. We even went on camping trips, out to the clubs, worked on art projects together, and went shopping for clothes and accessories. It was basically the stereotypical gay man and straight woman BFF dream come true, and everybody was happy and content. But he started disappearing on a regular basis after that, eventually missing not just social appointments, but his work shifts too. I suspected, obviously, that drugs were the problem, but had no clue what to do about it. I started pressing him a little bit to get him to tell me what was up, and he just said he was going through it. Steffi's parents had successfully gotten an order to increase his child support payments, and he was feeling pinched and despondent about his daughter. I was understanding of this, of course. He had pictures of Melissa all over his room. It was clear that this was a huge deal to him. One weekend, he was acting especially upset and went missing completely. He missed work and wasn't answering his phone. I called hospitals and so forth looking for him, after trying the usual friends and hangouts. Eventually, we went out looking for him. It had been 3 days without a trace. We were afraid that something bad happened. Finally, he stumbled back in, and here's what happened. He had been at Starbucks, and some guy had started slinging gay slurs, and they got into a fight. Jack had spent the weekend in jail. Not long after this incident, Jack went off to visit his daughter for one of the 2 times that he got to see her that year. They were meeting in San Francisco, which seemed odd, as she lived in the Midwest. But whatever, it was vacation season. While he was away, I got an email from a man I didn't know asking me if Jack was going to bring Tina with him, down to SF. What the heck? I had no clue who this man was or who Tina was. Some of you know, I am sure. I sure as heck know now, and how the heck did this guy get my email address? A Of course, I started investigating, trying to figure out what was going on. And it didn't take me long to find out that Tina is a slang term for crystal methamphetamine. I was of course suspicious, given Jack's past, and then something started nagging at me. Questions I had about this situation with his daughter. Little subtle things that didn't seem quite right. Since Jack was out of the apartment for a good couple of weeks, I did something I know no one endorses doing. I snooped through his desk. I knew something wasn't adding up, and I had to know if he was telling the truth about this distant daughter. I looked through his desk, and I found his old high school yearbooks. I found out Steffi's last name, and I started combing through public records, newspaper obits, social security death records, and the white pages. Steffi, Jack's dead girlfriend, alive in rural Indiana. Absolutely the same person, verified with birth dates and photos. So what about the daughter? Maybe she was still real. After all, there were all those photos and she looked so much like Jack, but it didn't take much longer before I discovered the truth about that too. Melissa wasn't his daughter. She was his niece. His brother's kids, but I had seen him writing checks for child support. What the heck? And the rest came down like dominoes. He had never been in the army, he never went to art school, and didn't even go to San Francisco to visit his quote-unquote daughter, but a look through his IM log confirmed, run some drugs and party. Pretty much nothing he told us had been true. It was all one big tragic lie, told very convincingly by a sympathetic character named Jack, and he was coming back in just a day to live under our roof and do who knows what kind of drugs and tell more lies. What should we do? We were trying to figure out how and when to confront him, and possibly kick him out when he returned. We tried to just act normal, and since Jack had such a disarming personality, it was pretty easy to just dissociate what we knew and enjoy joking around with him like usual. We were still trying to figure out how to deal with this situation when Jack had a new crisis come up. He had gone to the clinic and tested positive for HIV. Nightmare come true. Of course, we were there for him as he dealt with this. Held his hand, listened to him talk, gave all the support we could. Though I admit it was in the back of my mind at the time. I wonder if this is really true or if this is another lie to get sympathy. Of course, you could never ask for proof of something like that. And, of course, you could never kick out a friend when he was dealing with such a life-changing blow, so we decided to just sit on what we knew and let him adjust and cope, and then maybe find some trumped-up excuse to move out on our own later in the year. Just quietly slip away. I did tell him I had gotten the weird email though, and asked him directly if he was using meth. Of course he said no. He kept talking about his daughter and started agonizing about how he was going to tell her that her dad had HIV, and how if he died, he could at least be left with Steffi. Oh, biting my tongue was so hard, but it would have been just too cruel not to. Then things started getting even weirder. Jack started coming on to me. Yeah, supposedly he was the gayest gay who ever gayed, and of course I was married. Not only that, but to his supposed best friend. I didn't take it as seriously as an affront, accordingly, figuring he was being jokey or ironic at first, but it started to ramp up and it was even more confusing than anything so far. Other weird things started happening. He started wearing really weird outfits, like a hippie skirt. He didn't usually cross-dress, and a fur coat and a fedora. He would go out in public like this. He didn't seem psychotic, and he said it was his form of gender expression. Okay. Our kitchenware and dish towels started disappearing. Completely disappearing. He spent a lot of time in his room and then went out to the woods to think. When he would come back from the woods, sometimes he would be normal, but other times he would be all emotional and would have some story to tell about a weird thing that happened to him. The weirdest was when he came back from the woods with blood on his clothes and shoes, his hair matted, smelling like blood and still cigarettes. He said he had gone to visit friends, a couple who he met through an HIV plus support group, and who had also been dealing with depression. When he got to their house, the lights were off and something was wrong. He broke in the side door and found them both very gorily dead. He called the police and then took off to the forest to have a nervous breakdown. He told this story in chilling detail, talking about stepping in splattered brains and washing it off in a creek while smoking a full pack of cigarettes. But the weirdest part of that episode was how he tried to tell us that they had deeded the house to him so we could all move in as soon as the biohazard crews cleaned it up. What the heck? In the middle of all of this, he lost his job and we had to shoulder more of the expenses. There was no question that he was on drugs now. Obviously, his behavior had really deteriorated. Normally, you would just go to court and evict a roommate with all of this going on, but again, he had been a friend and supposedly just been diagnosed with an expensive, life-threatening disease, and yada yada yada. It would have looked really bad to kick him out. And what if he was telling the truth about having HIV? Then we would be heartless. Plus, the legality was super complicated because he was on the lease. We were stuck in a little bit frantic, and every time we would start to get a plan together, he would throw some other weirdness our way. He went to the pound and got a dog. Since he was off thinking, doing drugs, all the time, I took care of her most of the time. Sometimes he would get all mad and insist on taking her with him though, which I hated because when he came back days later, she seemed hungry and sad because he didn't take proper care of her. Man, it would take another post to tell all the weird stuff that happened in this last chapter. At some point, he got religion and started reading books by Rick Warren. No shit. He tried to get me to watch weird porn with him, and he kept obsessing about my boobs, and we caught him listening through the door to catch us having sex. But mostly, he was gone all the time. His room hermetically sealed with weird smells coming out of it. And we were quietly terrified and exploring our legal options to get him the heck out. We had to sneak around to figure this out. He had started obsessively listening in on us in our room, so we would park our car at the far end of the parking lot and sit out there with the music cranked to talk and try to figure out our next move. Whenever we asked him about drugs, he denied it and started to get touchy about being asked. He had an answer for everything and a new story of woe or terror every week. And while we basically assumed he was lying about everything at that point, it was always stuff that it was too touchy to call out or impossible to prove. Thus, we started to feel like we were going a little bit crazy, because we couldn't tell up from down anymore. At some point, I gingerly approached Jack about the daughter issue. He didn't try to refute my allegation that he had lied about his girlfriend dying and his niece being his daughter. He didn't apologize or explain or say anything else. He actually fell asleep. Then in the middle of the day in the living room, the dish towels started reappearing. On the floor in the living room was something sticky. Well, I guess it could have been super glue. Finally, the weird smell was bad enough that we had to find out what it was. He might not just be smoking. He might actually be cooking meth in there, right? And, of all the terrible stuff, that would have to be the last straw that would justify kicking him out, even though he was struggling with disease and oppression and mental illness. So, while Jack was out reading Rick Warren with some friends one weekend, my husband and I put on surgical masks, leather boots, and gloves and went into his room. The gear was because once we cracked the door open, we could see that it was piled 3 feet deep with debris, rotting food, sex toys, and other extremely disgusting things. Using ski poles to clear a path, we investigated. It looked like a psychotic, sexually deviant hamster had been in there. Clothes were piled on the floor, then peed on. Boxes and papers had been torn to shreds. This is apparently a meth head thing. Porn was strewn everywhere. There was what we recognized as his usual going out bag, thrown in the middle of the bear-stained mattress, its contents spilling out into the bed. Lube, a Rick Warren book, and the biggest dildo anyone has ever seen. My spouse skied on over to check out the bathroom, and I went to Jack's computer desk. In the bathroom, our missing kitchenware seemed to have been appropriated to make a mini meth lab with some random household products. There was a little scale too, and some white powder, if there was any remaining doubt. The dish towels were in there too, covered in about 5 different body fluids. The toilet area, well, it lives on in legend. He didn't appear to stand or sit or aim. It looked more like he was just propelling stuff at the wall. But at the desk, I found something even more horrifying. An open IM window explaining in no uncertain terms where Jack had gone that night. Not only had Jack been cooking and selling meth, not only had he been earning money through prostitution, We had suspected as much. He had been prostituting out his dog. The desk was covered in note cards with instructions, leaving no doubt about exactly what was going on. We just went and started packing our stuff, as fast as we could. I called my parents and they agreed we could stay with them until further notice. We started driving over carloads of stuff, careful not to be caught by Jack, who no doubt would be pissed because how could a lying drug addict with no job afford to live on his own? He was gone a lot, but he would come back at unpredictable moments, and now he was angry and paranoid and on edge a lot of the time. He claimed the police were stalking him. Was he paranoid or was he about to get busted? We were scared to call the cops ourselves because what if they thought we were in on the drug stuff? How could we prove we were not? It was nerve-wracking. Finally, we confronted Jack and told him that he had to get all the drug paraphernalia out of the apartment. We were not going to go down for his crime. He was furious and stormed out and drove away with tires squealing. We took that as our cue to gather up as much as we could and get the heck out for good. Fortunately, he left the dog, so we were going to take her to save her. It was 3 a.m. and we were just about to leave for the last time when we heard his tires squeal into the parking lot again. He slammed into the curb, slammed his door, and started stomping up the stairs. We laid down flat on the floor in our room, hoping he wouldn't realize we were there. He came into the apartment, angry, declaring he was going to mess us up and that he was going to kill someone. He was destroying everything loudly. I was really afraid we were going to die, and my brief life literally flashed before my eyes. As his footsteps approached, I was curled around the dog, and suddenly he was standing there. Give me the dog, she's mine. She is legally mine, hands her over. I held onto the dog motionless, then he yanked her up and I couldn't hold on. He stormed back out and squealed away. We finished packing and drove out to my parents'. We stayed there for about a month, then settled the tab at the old place and moved into a new apartment, far from the old neighborhood. We got a bunch of creepy calls and scary emails from Jack for a while. Worse, we saw him around in unlikely places, and he showed up at my parents' once, but didn't get out of his car or come to the door. I think I saw him once at the new apartment, but couldn't be sure because it was dark. We were definitely on edge for a long time. Once he had been gone long enough, the landlord swamped out the apartment and threw out all of his stuff and sent him a bill. He messaged me 2 years later and claimed he had gotten clean and sober. He wanted to know our new address so he could send us some stuff, but I evaded. I still don't know if he really had HIV or what really happened when he came home covered in blood, or what the story was about with the niece, or even what happened to the poor dog. Seriously, I know no one endorses snooping. I get it. I know. You don't have to tell me. There were a lot of things I would have done then that I would not do now. But in the long run, I have to be glad that I snooped and found out what was going on, because it was becoming way too crazy. Hey, first time poster here. Not quite as harrowing as some of the stuff on here, but it's messed with my head quite a bit. So I'll set the scene first, I guess. I'm a dude and I was 15 at the time, going to a shady school in Manchester. It's not the greatest city. And at lunch, my friends and I would go to this office in the school, where the teachers would leave us be as long as we didn't trash the place. Somehow over the years, we had managed to make it pretty exclusive, getting teachers to remove the jerks, if you will. But certain people, like new starters or foreign kids sometimes, were always allowed in. There was this ginger Polish girl called Maya that started there and had been getting some crap, as I'm sure you could imagine. A new ginger Polish girl in a UK school. She was an easy target for nasty little kids. Now let me get this straight. I'm not mentioning this to build a kind of sympathy for her. I'm only mentioning it because I think this may have been a catalyst of sorts. Either way, one lunch, she was sitting at the computer next to where we used to play cards. She looked kind of down. While we were playing, she was pouting like when someone's trying to signal you to ask them if they're alright, you know? So I asked if she was alright, and she said the kids were being horrible, calling her ugly and stuff. This is where it started. Okay, so when a girl says she's being called ugly, what as a bloke is the first thing you say? For any guy, almost the first thing out of your mouth is, you're well fit. She was 2 years below me, so I was pretty sure it would fall upon deaf ears. For the next month or so, I can't honestly say I never noticed her at all. I'm not even sure when she started following me, but I can remember exactly when I noticed. Apparently, she used to get the same bus home as me. Well, it was 2 buses, and I never even knew she was there. Not at school, not on the bus. Let's say she was socially invisible. The only reason I noticed is when I was walking into my driveway and my bag strap snapped, so I turned around to pick up my stuff and I noticed that she was walking by just staring. At first, I thought nothing of it. I mean, I'm not the best looking guy. I'm tall and skinny. We call it lanky in the UK, so the idea of being followed never even once crossed my mind, but I had noticed her, and from then on, she was everywhere. At first, I'm not going to lie, it gave me a big confidence boost to have a stalker per se. But oh boy, let me tell you that wore off really quick. At first, I didn't say anything to anyone. I mean, she's only 13 and she poses no threat to me physically. What was there to worry about, huh? But until it happens to you, you won't understand the sense of tension you get when you're around that person until it happens to you. Okay, so a quick detour before the comments is set ablaze with crazy stuff. No, I was not interested in her, and regardless of gender, being stalked is always horrible. Every day I would get the bus back and she would be there. Well, I guess she was always there, but it was not the same. She was always watching, and when I look over at her, she'd quickly look away. She always got off at the same street as me, so I thought she lived close by. So one day I acted as I normally do, walking down my drive, slyly keeping an eye on her to walk past, and then followed her. She only started getting off at my stop after I had made that single comment. Well, at least to my knowledge, as I said, she kind of just disappeared into the background. I followed her mainly to know where my enemy was. I was legit walking around for about 45 minutes, pretty much exactly back up the bus route towards school, and watched her walk into her house. This is when I first had that real dirty feeling you get, as I realized she walked almost an extra hour a day every day just to watch me walk into my house. She stayed on the bus to creep on me. I mean, this chick was everywhere. She was on me like white on rice. Outside of school wasn't so bad because I could just ditch her. But after a few months of the conjoined twin treatment, she started to get brave and chatty with my friends, who all thought this was hilarious, by the way, and were always taking the piss. I didn't for a second entertain this and was quite frankly getting mad at my mates for putting me in this situation again and again. You know what it's like being forced to interact with someone who is following you. Oh, but that wasn't just it. We'll get to that. So the months go by. My mates are taking the piss, and the longer she stalks, the more she learns about my hangouts, and such is appearing a lot more. Now, at this moment, a few things were happening at the same time. I'll try describing it to the best of my ability, so bear with me. But my friend thought it would be a good idea to try to start to get with this girl, as she was always chatting to them to get close. I can't say for sure, but I'm almost certain that he was hooking up with her, which just made this all the more messed up. A new Polish girl had also started in school, and she was the most beautiful girl I'd ever seen. After a few weeks, I plucked up the courage to ask her out, and to my surprise, she said yes. Sweet. This would be short-lived though, because I had no idea at the time Carolina was actually good friends with Maya. And as soon as Maya found out, she went around the school telling everyone who would listen, and of course Carolina blamed me for telling everyone and cut that short. I have no idea what was running through Maya's head when she found out, but her little plan had worked and had pushed me to breaking point. I had to deal with this. I thought this was getting better, as the focus had seemed to be off me while she was with my friend. What a jerk he is, by the way. But apparently not. I ended up caving and inviting her into my house so I could get to the bottom of this, which in hindsight might not have been a good idea. So I invited her around while everyone was out. Now, I can't remember the entire conversation, but she knew where all the rooms were and what they looked like. I remember the chills as she told me about my house. I eventually asked her why she had ruined my very short relationship with Carolina, and she scowled horribly at the name and just replied, "You're mine and you always will be." I lost my shit, yelling at her, threatening to kick her in the head if she didn't leave me alone, but she seemed to enjoy me shaking and shouting at her. Now, at this point, she'd been following me and stuff for about a year and a half. I didn't have long left in school, but she knew where I lived and my hangouts. She had even managed to get real close to one of my friends. The straw that broke the camel's back was that she had been coming around when I wasn't there, getting really friendly with my mom. My mom's bipolar and manic depressive. Some days she can barely get out of bed. Never mind out of the house. I have no idea why this was never mentioned, but she eventually told my mom she was my girlfriend, and she was sorry for lying to my mom. Well, my mom freaking freaked out. She was only 14 at this time, and I was about to turn 17, so my mom went off the deep end. I think the verbal beatdown my mom gave her is what made her stop, but man, did I really get it drilled into me that night. After trying to explain that she had been stalking me for almost the last 2 years, trying to get close, I found out that Maya had been coming around for months and told my mom we just happened to go to the same school to get friendly. I don't know why the yelling my mom had given her made her stop stalking me. My mom is pretty nasty when she gets going, but I only had a few weeks left in school, and she wasn't following me. I tried to think what could have been if she had sunk her claws any deeper into my life. I know this isn't as terrifying as I'd like to be honest, but reading all of these made me remember that feeling of dread in this situation. I'm sorry for this long post too. I didn't realize how long this would take to explain. I'll begin by giving a little bit of background. At this time, I was a 16-year-old female, working at a chain coffee place while in high school. I'm in college now. I'm 19, 7 hours away from said place. This happened at a time in my life in which I was super shy and had a tough time standing up for myself. In retrospect, I could have handled it a lot better. I used to work closing shifts with my best friend after school, so it would be like from 3 to 10 p.m. or 5 to 10 p.m. We worked at a relatively dead store, so we spent most of our time playing music and talking. We did our duties, of course, like taking out the trash and restocking. Although both of us always dreaded taking the trash out as we had to go out back. The dumpsters were behind the store in a dimly lit area next to a sketchy liquor store. One night a man came in. It wasn't unusual to have customers come near closing. It was just uncommon to see anyone we didn't already know. Our store was mostly just regulars. He was lanky and probably around 30. I mostly remember his eyes. They were piercing, the type that never breaks a stare. I remember initially thinking he was attractive. Yikes. The way he spoke was short and concise, just ordering a small hot latte. I made his order and that was it. I told my friend about how I thought he was attractive, and then we started referring to him as the small hot latte guy. We always called people by their drink orders. He came a bunch of times after that, each time staying a little bit longer and longer, talking a little bit more and more. One day he came with a woman, probably his girlfriend. I remember I felt a little bit weird, like she was staring at me or like they had spoken about me beforehand. She glanced over at him and said, "Wow, she's pretty." I didn't think much of it and said thank you. Served them, and I thought that would be the end of it. He then began showing up and talking to me a lot without her. He started off as being friendly. I honestly don't even know what we talk about. I think music. Then he got kind of flirty. Initially I was flattered, but being underage and immature, I didn't even think about the fact that it was kind of alarming. He began to stay for a while. Sometimes he would bring a laptop or a notebook. I could feel him staring at me and listening to our conversations. But at that point, I wasn't getting creepy vibes from him, as my coworker and I had dealt with our fair share of creeps. He then somehow got my number. To this day, I honestly don't know how. He texted me and somehow, I still wasn't creeped out. We would talk about music a lot, and then I began to learn more about him. He was in his late 30s and had prior problems with substance abuse that he never really got into. He went back to school for art and would show me his pieces. He'd also send me a lot of pictures of nature. I thought they were nice. Looking back, they were actually pretty creepy. For example, a picture of his backyard sent at like 3 a.m. He would stay and work on his art as well. He then told me he barely enjoyed hot lattes, that he just wanted to come and see me. He would come in and give me gifts even. This was the point I finally started realizing that I did not like this situation. He started by just giving little snacks or drinks. I would accept but would never eat or drink them. It wasn't that I necessarily thought he had ill intentions. I just had a hard time accepting gifts. I remember one night he brought me a book about one of his favorite artists. I reluctantly took it, but had tried to decline before. I remember telling him about one of my favorite musicians and sending him a link to a performance I really liked. Then he started getting sexual while talking nonstop about the song. He began talking super aggressively, and I would laugh it off and decline when he would ask to send pictures. I began talking less and less and told my friends about the situation. She agreed that it was getting creepy and said I should maybe change my schedule. I told her I'd be fine because I'm stubborn. He'd still come in every week at closing time, and he'd even stay in his car till we closed. Meaning, he would watch me go to the back to take the trash out. I began making excuses as to why I couldn't talk and began going to the back of the store when I would see him. He then sent me a bunch of texts about how great I looked while working. I didn't respond, but he kept texting, and I told him I didn't want to talk anymore. He sent a bunch of messages describing me how much I meant to him and how he wouldn't be alright. Started freaking out, and I blocked his number. Still, I returned to work. I honestly thought that he would stop coming by. I was wrong. I felt uneasy the whole shift. My friend said that if he came by, he would just go to the back and wait it out. I saw his car coming and my heart sank. I was on the verge of tears and hurried to the back. I could hear them talking but couldn't decipher what exactly was being said. Then about 10 minutes later she came to the back. I could visibly see that she was upset. We ended up both just crying and hugging each other. Not the first time we've done that. She told me he kept asking to see me and asking how I was, and she just kept refusing. She told him how I was underage and how he made me feel uncomfortable. He wouldn't give up. Eventually, she threatened him and he left. We were both shaken up, but I thought it was over. It was time to take out the trash and lock up, and we both felt okay. I was opening the door while juggling like 3 bags of trash and saw something on the ground. I was confused at first, but then realized what I saw. It was flowers and a note. I never felt so sick to my stomach and looked around the parking lot. I didn't see his car. I threw them out immediately and told my friend I didn't want to read the note. She read it and told me I had to. It was something to the effect of, "I've never felt so connected to someone. You are breaking my heart. Please don't do this. I'm sorry." Looking back, I honestly didn't lead him on, but initially, I just felt as if I was in the wrong. Nonetheless, we turned the corner to take the trash out and both hoped that the parking lot was empty. It wasn't. Let's just say the trash was not going to get taken out that night. I continued working there and still worked there on my breaks from college. I had different hours after that, and in the summer I was going to leave for my freshman year, and I saw him again. It was around 3 p.m. It was busy, we made eye contact, and he left. That was the last time I saw him. Looking back, I was so naive and could have handled the situation so much better. I am forever thankful to my friends. Over 20 years ago, I dropped out of school and moved to the Midwest to live with my boyfriend at the time. His name was Tom and I barely knew him, but he had only just turned 20 and was feeling disenchanted with his life. I was in college but had no direction and no idea what I wanted to do, and had just had a falling out with my best friends, leaving me with no real friends either. Then I met this guy who lived halfway across the country. He was everything I had wanted as a new adult. Charming and sweet, and everyone loved him. Now in my mid-30s, I recognize a lot of things he was doing as narcissistic behavior. He love-bombed me from the start, convinced me that I would be happier if I just left my whole life, and wanted to isolate me from my family and few remaining friends. And I left him. My family didn't take it lightly and tried their hardest to convince me not to go. But after they met him, they eased up. Like I said, he was a charmer. They ultimately resigned themselves to the fact that I was a legal adult and could do what I wanted in the long run, and they didn't want to risk not having a relationship with me at all, so they backed off a bit and wished me well. Almost as soon as I had moved, his attitude changed completely. He would get mad at nothing and make me leave the room if he was in it and didn't feel like talking. And eventually it progressed into him calling me stupid every chance he got and threatening to kick me out of the house almost every month. I always knew when it was coming too. He had a cycle. He also convinced me that I had nowhere else to go since I had no family close by and all of my friends were his friends first. I was trapped. I eventually fell into a pretty deep depression and just resigned myself to my new fate. His behavior only got worse. He started to berate me in front of other people. On one occasion, I asked him for a cigarette when we were hanging out with some friends. He took one out of the pack and threw it across the room and said, "Bitches smoke last," and started laughing. No one else laughed, but no one else did anything either. He punched me in the stomach one day in front of his grandma, who just said, "Oh, Tom, stop that," and he laughed it off like it was nothing. He treated me like this day in and day out for almost 4 years. During the last year that I was there, he would lock me out of my bedroom and I would hear him talking to other girls. I found messages on his MySpace account. Yeah, this was a long time ago. Of him talking to other women and telling them he was going to break up with me and date them instead. One girl in particular, April, also tried to talk to me and befriend me. I didn't know the extent of their relationship and just thought she was trying to be nice to me. At the time, I had no idea the nature of their relationship, but thought it was odd they were being so chatty online. My birthday is on New Year's Day, so on New Year's Eve, the last year that I lived there, I wanted to go out with some friends. All of my friends were also his friends and we knew them all very well, so I didn't think it was weird to go out with him. I should mention that he hardly ever left the house and didn't have a cell phone and would never come to the house phone if I called. All the girls he talked to were done online in messaging apps. I asked him if he wanted to go, but he said no like I knew he would. So I went. And I had fun for the first time in what seemed like forever. My friend, who was a dude, drank too much and couldn't drive me home, so we both slept at his sister's house. We slept completely separately and had no feelings for each other at all, and nothing did or ever would have happened. I didn't think twice about staying and didn't bother calling the house to let Tom know that I wasn't coming home because, like I've made clear, he mostly didn't want me around and wouldn't have come to the phone anyways. The next morning when I got home, I turned the corner to walk down the hallway in our shotgun-shaped house. He was walking towards me with a horrible look on his face, and I knew I was in trouble. He shoved me as hard as he could into the wall. I went into the bedroom and he followed. He started yelling at me, calling me all kinds of names, and saying that he expected better of me. I sat down on the edge of the bed and he stood over me still yelling. Then all of a sudden he punched me right in the face. Just hard enough to shock me but not leave a black eye. Something came over me at that point and I stood up and told him, "Don't ever touch me again," and walked out. Over the course of the next few days, I packed up what little of my stuff I could gather and told him I was going to stay at my sister's back in California for a while. He thought I was coming back, but I never did. I sent his grandma money to pack my stuff and ship it to me, and I never saw him again. But that doesn't mean the story is over. Fast forward a few months, and I see online that he's dating April, the girl from MySpace. I laughed a little at it since she was still trying to be my friend, even though I had never met her and she had been talking to my ex while I was still with him. I wrote her off as a nutcase and didn't think much of it. That is, until one night I got 30 text messages from an unknown number. It wasn't unknown for long since she identified herself almost immediately. She was saying the world's worst things to me. I had been casually mentioning to online friends that she was a weirdo, and that they probably deserved each other, since it struck me as weird that she was so two-faced about being nice to me, while she was sending my boyfriend at the time nude photos. She had apparently been alerted to my comments. She wasn't at all happy about it. Among the text messages were threats of coming out to California to kill me, and warning me that she fights dirty. She had gotten my number out of his phone one night and was going ballistic. I told her to stop or I would call the police, and that only shut her up for the one night. Every single day I would hear from her. I began dating somebody new and she would add him on every social media platform and try to talk to him. She did that with everyone I showed interest in publicly online. She made fake profiles to stalk me on social media and call me horrible names. When I finally went public with what my ex had done to me and how he had treated me, she lost it even more. It took me about a year after I left Tom to tell anyone what he did to me. When I finally did, most people were sympathetic and offered words of comfort. But April, she sent me a 4-page long email that was filled with delusions. She wrote about how she and I were good friends and how she wished that we could still be, and how she tried to be my friends no matter what. She wrote that I was lying about my abuse and that I didn't have battered woman syndrome. And that she knew that for a fact because she majored in psychology in community college. Seriously. She wrote that she had met all of my Midwest friends and they all hated me and laughed about how stupid I was. She wrote that she thought I was a closeted lesbian and that I need therapy. Also saying that she was in contact with a lawyer and they were working on a harassment case against me. Of course, none of this was true. I shut my laptop after reading that letter in total shock. Not only did I have to deal with being treated like garbage for 4 whole years, but now I was dealing with gaslighting from my abusive ex's new girlfriend. What the heck? I responded to her, which I shouldn't have, and told her that I thought she needed professional help and to stop contacting me. Then I wrote to my ex's email that I remembered and told him to tell her to leave me alone. I never heard back from him, but I stopped hearing from April for a while. About a year after that, she started up again. She made new social media profiles and would post the same things I did immediately after I posted about them. She bought clothes that looked like mine, wore her hair the same way. I work in the art industry and all of a sudden, she started posting about how art is life. I play guitar, so she posted about how she wants to play guitar. I started a cooking blog and even guest blogged for a few websites, and she made posts about how her dad was a chef, so naturally cooking was in her blood. If you're wondering how I knew about what she was posting, it's because she always made herself known. She would like or unlike my photos on Instagram. She would comment on profiles she knew I interacted with. A few times, she would message me with weird nonsense like, "Stop stalking me," when I had literally never spoken to her. Also, yes, people can have similar interests, but 1 or 2 things are a coincidence. Having every interest in common with someone is not, and she couldn't just be into the same things as me. If I had a hobby or an interest, she was not only into the same things, but she was the best at it and it came naturally to her. And she was not only good at it, but so good that people paid her to do it. I once made the mistake of telling a girl online who I didn't really know about April, saying something in passing like, "That girl is crazy." This girl immediately told April what I said, and I started receiving hate mail from people I never heard of before. Friends of April's came out in droves as she posted Instagram stories about how I was stalking her and I was threatening her. Her best friend contacted me on Instagram and told me I was crazy and that what I was doing was a crime, that I should expect to hear from a lawyer with a cease and desist order. I told her that if she needed my lawyer's information, I could forward that to her since I knew that there was no way I was ever in danger of legal action. About 3 months later, that same best friend sent me an email that she had gotten from a blog I ran at the time. She apologized for what she said to me, said that her friend was clearly disturbed and she had no idea, and was sorry for invalidating my trauma that I had experienced with my ex. This last event was maybe 4 years ago. I don't hear much from April anymore, but that's not to say I don't hear from her at all. She still posts on Twitter about how I abused her, and how I'm still lying about my experiences with Tom. Please remember that I have never ever met this person, and have only ever had conversations with her in passing when she would message me over a decade ago on MySpace. Not only did I have to endure 4 years of abuse at the hands of my ex-boyfriend Tom, but I have to deal with over 10 years of hate messages and harassment from a clearly unhinged woman who has fixated on me for some reason. I've heard from people that they are no longer together, but that hasn't stopped her for good, it seems. I still hear from her every once in a while. I write all of this to say, if you have experienced trauma or abuse, you are not alone. And that even if certain people don't believe you and call you a liar, I believe you. No matter who you are or my personal feelings about you, if you have been abused or assaulted, I believe you. There is never any reason to call someone a liar publicly for years. So, to April, I hope that he never hurt you and that you are doing okay. I hope you get the help that you need and that you're safe and comfortable. But please, let's never meet. This was many years ago, maybe when I was 20 or 21. I was assaulted when out jogging in a park while on vacation somewhere north in Ontario. It was deep in the woods. I was listening to music alone. I should have been more careful. There was this guy with a blue dirt bike at the entrance to the trail who was acting really creepy and suspicious. He kept trying to start conversations with me as I was unpacking my stuff and getting ready. Kept asking about things like, "Where did you come from?" or "You work out?" When I was changing my shoes, he asked me for my shoe size, and I immediately thought he was a creep. I just lightly chatted with him and kept my gaze down. I was wearing a hat, so it would hopefully hide my face. Nearly half an hour of jogging and sightseeing, I saw the blue bike ahead. It was parked off to the side, and I remember the feeling like a lump in my stomach suddenly formed, and I thought for sure that guy was probably ahead to try something. I was on the main path for the whole way since, but considering he was waiting there, I decided to backtrack a little and take the nearest side path to avoid the encounter. 5 minutes into the side path, there was this narrow spot in the trees that led onto an old concrete square. I think it was like a water reservoir or a foundation or something. I wasn't thinking and just kept going. I stepped in this black adhesive stuff on the other side of a lip of concrete. My shoes were completely stuck. It was like some kind of tar or glue. I don't know. I didn't know what it was and just assumed it was something from the structure, like leftover construction stuff. I spent a couple of minutes just trying to work my shoes out, but eventually had to take them off for better leverage. Then I saw the man. He came towards me. I felt panicked. I was going to get my bear spray when he said he was here to help. I didn't want to potentially aggravate him or do something that could get me in trouble, so I stood back and let him try to get my shoes out. I noticed that he was just pretending that he couldn't get them out, and I remembered what he said about my shoe size and thought something was so off, so I backed away and considered spraying him. It happened fast. He turned around and slapped my foot with the black stuff. I stumbled trying to get back. I missed the spray and he was wrestling it out of my hand. I tried to knee him in the groin. He released me and ran off. I got my sock off and was going to run, but he just had more of the stuff. He had some metal bucket of the black stuff, and he was slapping handfuls of it on my feet. Couldn't kick him and it was difficult to move. I was screaming and hitting him as best as I could. Sorry if this is too much detail, but he was telling me to shut up and even used it on my mouth. He pushed me to the ground, took my backpack and just continued sticking the stuff to me. My body was frozen in fear. I heard a buzzing sound and I knew what it was without seeing it. I began struggling to get up or kick him or do anything. My clothes were pinned and my arms too. I'm not going to give details, but yeah. He then started using a vibrator on me. I was crying, stretching it as far as I could. If I got an arm almost out, he would add more. I rarely ever masturbated at the time, so suffice to say it was overstimulation. He didn't undress me apart from my pack and socks and didn't use his you-know-what anywhere, so I'm at least grateful for that. He just kept buzzing me and fondling my body with stuff, asking things like, "Do you like it?" or "Does it feel good?" It was probably around an hour of that and he was recording it. I just let him do whatever until I found a way out or someone came. Then he brought up his towel to my nose. It was fuming with some chemical. I was thrashing and trying to scream. Somebody heard, I guess, and shouted. I don't remember much. Time was all fuzzy. It felt like I was falling on a roller coaster. When I got my thoughts back together, it was getting dark and I was alone. I spent a long time getting out, ripping my clothes and scraping the stuff off my body where it was on my skin. I still don't know what it was, but Googling it suggested birdlime or construction adhesive. It was also apparently a type of fetish, so yeah. I walked back to my car. There was nobody there at night, and I just drove back to my cabin and sat there in the bath, not even turning the water on, just sitting there thinking of what happened, trying to get as much off of me before I washed myself. My feet and other parts around my belly were stained black for a couple of weeks, and that night I just lay there silent. Even now, just touching stuff like soap brings back that time, and I can't help but feel weird by the slimy feeling of it. I'm wondering if anyone has ever had similar experiences or encounters with black adhesive. This happened a few years ago in Upper Ontario on a semi-official hiking trail. I really don't remember much of what happened during or after the assault, possibly because of whatever fumes I was exposed to. I remember driving very slowly because I was still feeling off balance. In hindsight, I probably shouldn't have been driving, but there was no traffic that late. Some years ago, my family lived in a heavily wooded area in the Pacific Northwest. I was 5 at the time. My sister was 6. Our yard was fairly good-sized, at the end of which was nothing but thick woods that ran back a long way. Our parents always told us to never wander off into the woods, but my sister and I were raised with adventurous spirits. That's why I always blamed this story on my folks. So one day we get the swell idea to go for a little hike in the woods on our own. We waited for our parents to both go inside, and off we went merrily tromping through the woods without a care in the world. About maybe 10 minutes in, we hear a rustling in the brush ahead, and we both stop dead in our tracks. We both looked at each other with sheer terror in our eyes as we saw a big bearded man approach with a red stained axe in tow. His white wife-beater t-shirt was also splattered red. We had never seen this man before, and he was quite the sight. As a young child, it's hard to remember certain events, but this one has been stuck in my brain. He had a giant physique. The man asked us why we were out in the middle of the woods alone, but we were so frightened, all we could do was cry. He asked us if we wanted to come with him, and he would make us some hot cocoa. We were both shivering at the sight of this man, and at that moment, our parents could be heard yelling for us. Thankful for that, because if this man were any kind of good person, he wouldn't have looked startled and hurried away. After the dude walked away, we both booked it back home as fast as we could. After each of us received a whooping, we told our parents about the man, but my parents must have thought we were lying because they never saw anyone like that in the neighborhood or around our general area. To this day, I'm still not sure what the intentions of this guy were, but you would think he would have asked us where our folks were at, instead of inviting us to wherever for cocoa. I started creeping here a few months ago and fell in love. Originally, I was sad I didn't have any stories to tell, and I kept racking my brain for any creepy memories, but couldn't think of any. Then this past week, a couple of small things accumulated to me, saying, "Damn, I actually think this is Let's Not Meet worthy," so I created this account to share. It's long though, sorry. I'll start by saying I'm a 21-year-old female. I just got a new job hostessing at a restaurant in the downtown area of the very large city I live in. Above the restaurant are pretty pricey lofts. On the first floor is where I work, along with the lobby, elevators, Chipotle, and a bakery, all of which have at least one door near the back of the store that leads to the lobby. When I got the job, I got access to the parking garage that the residents use. From there, I can take a back way to the lobby, which leads to one of the doors connected to my job. Every day I work, I pass a concierge working for the lofts. Occasionally, we speak to them. Like if one of the lobby's restrooms goes out of order, but other than that, it's pretty rare, which is why I thought it was odd when I saw Mike. He's the nightly concierge. Looks around, late 40s to early 50s, round glasses and short. He was around the bar scanning the area like he was looking for something. When he saw me, he came over and asked me for some extra promotion cards that we had been handing out to guests so he could give some to the residents. I simply asked my manager for some and gave it to Mike. That was it. At the end of my shift, Mike comes in and gives me 4 chocolate-covered strawberries, thanking me for my help. I'm used to everyone at this job and area being very polite and kind, so I accepted them with excitement and without a second thought. A couple of days later, I saw Mike again. I was packing a to-go order when he came up and said he had something for me. To follow him. At the concierge desk, he presented me with a bag that reminded me of old brown lunch bags, but was white and an envelope. Inside the bag was a cupcake, and inside the envelope were 2 miniature Hershey's chocolate bars. At this point, I was beginning to feel too much attention had been placed on myself. I needed to share, after all. Sharing is caring, right? I faked excitement, which I realized I shouldn't have. Thanked him and asked if he'd met the other new hostess, Michelle, who I was working with that night. He said no, so I introduced them. 10 minutes later, he brings a second cupcake. Too many sweets make me nauseous, so I ended up giving them to Michelle. He hands the cupcake to me, saying, "Stop by the desk on your way out. I have something for you." But the look on his face was creepy. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but it reminded me of the way a child looks when they've given good news and they're waiting to be praised. Now, I'm starting to think, it better not be another damn cupcake. The night goes by slowly and Mike, yet again, comes in and searches for me. I'm at one of the computers putting in an order and he hands me 2 sheets of paper with some stuff typed on them. He says he's writing a book about the history of the loss. Okay, you're writing a book and you hand me barely a page and a half worth of text. Whatever. At the end of the night, I asked one of my best friends that I work with to stop by the desk with me because I didn't want to go alone. Turns out it's a 3rd cupcake, along with a Cosmopolitan magazine. Inside that is a printout of a joke that someone emailed him. The cover of the magazine is 78 Crazy Hot Sex Facts, which I tried to ignore. He had crossed out the name of the resident it was being mailed to. Read the magazine, threw away the cupcake, and the joke wasn't funny. Finally, last night, I passed him as I was coming in. As soon as he sees me, his face lights up and I cringe inside. You see, this guy's nice and all, but too much is too much. He stops me and asks, "Hey, did you lose your purse?" "No, I didn't." "Well," and he pulls a small shopping bag out, and it's completely full. I didn't really want to look inside, so I kind of skimmed to the top. As I was pretending to be interested in the bag, he says, "You are the most beautiful girl I've ever seen, so," and trails off waiting for my reply. I acted like I didn't hear him and just thanked him with the fake smile, avoiding eye contact. "Do you want to look at it here, or?" I tell him no, I must clock in before I'm late. I am 30 minutes early. I power walk away, and as soon as I step inside the restaurant, I find Michelle and my manager and tell them what a nice surprise Mike gave me. They knew how creeped out I was by Mike, so they were 10 times more ecstatic than I was to see my little shopping bag. We take it to the back to inspect the items. Lots and lots of miniature feminine care products. Chapstick, wipes, perfume samples, a tampon, toothbrush, toothpaste, etc. And then the mother load. Small bottle of Astroglide natural lubricant. I do a laugh that is equivalent to, "Are you serious?" I feel violated for some reason. Really, really uncomfortable. I keep laughing though because I can't believe this old man just gave me a lube. Everyone is laughing fits too. Everyone else is having laughing fits too. Michelle, the bartender, my manager, and even some of the servers. Anyways, I don't look at the rest of the bag's contents. My manager offered to speak to Mike on my behalf to get him to stop, but I've never been the type to let other people do the talking for me. I'll do it the next time he tries to give me something. The night wears on and I'm on the phone taking an order to go, and Mike comes and drops off another cupcake. Yay. Gave it to Michelle again. She told me when she came in before me, he had asked her if she knew when I was coming in. Upon hearing my arrival was 2 hours away, he says, I have to wait a whole 2 hours before I get to see her." She said it didn't look like he was joking. Had to ask my manager to walk me to my car because I felt like Mike was going to follow me out there or pop out of the shadows or something. We did run into him after we left, but he didn't say more than goodnight, thankfully. After some deep gossip with a girl that's been working there for a couple of years, she enlightens me. She had come in to eat last night, so she was there and saw everything too. Mike was like this to another girl, the one whose shifts I took after she quit. She said he probably just grabbed all that stuff from gift bags from a party the banquet hall had earlier, not even paying attention to what was in them. But still inappropriate. And the book he was writing? Showed her the papers, and she said it's straight from a brochure the lofts give new residents about the history of the building. My general manager was thoroughly creeped out as well, and he's a creeper himself. He jokes like, "He gave you a bottle of lube? That's inappropriate. I'm going to have to confiscate that, okay?" He brought up a good point that I hadn't realized though. The cupcakes. They were homemade and nobody knew what he put in those. I could be eating semen while he sits at the bar, getting off on watching me/us eat it. I thought they were from the bakery next door. I'm not sure if I'm overreacting or not. I mean, the guy seems harmless, but I've only known him a grand total of 3 days. This is a story about my first trip to London and my first experience of the two. Our village guide group had taken around 19 girls down to London for the weekend to do the regular tourist hotspots and visit the Guiding World Center. Thrilling, I know. I was 14 at the time. I was more than excited to come to London and had received a lovely new coat for the occasion. We lived in rural Yorkshire, so it was quite a big to-do in our village. Believe it or not. We were packed off on the train and spent an unremarkable day and night in the capital city. Then came our tube trip. Unfortunately, the leaders had not planned for rush hour commuter traffic, and anyone can tell you the tube at peak times is a nightmare. It was certainly quite alarming to me, having genuinely never seen so many people crammed into such a tiny space, everybody pushing and rushing past us. We squashed into the corner of a carriage. I don't remember what line we were on. All I know is the 10-minute journey felt a lot longer for me. The carriage was completely packed, and everybody sandwiched into each other. As one of the older guides, I was on the outside of the group. The leaders had urged the younger guides ahead of them. This meant I was squished up against a friend of mine in front of me and a man I didn't know against my back. A few seconds into the journey, I noticed he is swaying against me, rocking and nudging me as the train moves. I push back as no one else in the carriage seems to be having trouble keeping their balance like him. This doesn't stop him, however. The rocking motion intensifies, and suddenly I realize he is rubbing the bottom of my coat. I didn't turn around at this point, terrified of why this stranger appears to be rubbing my bum. I tried to push up further against my friend. Sadly for me, there is literally nowhere to go. I am stuck against this stranger. He's breathing very heavily at this point, and I bite the bullet and look behind me. I've never seen a you-know-what before, but now there is one being rammed into my lower back while a man masturbates into my new coat. This is the point I should have said something, screamed, shouted, or punched him in the cock maybe. But no. Stand there completely in shock for the rest of the journey while this pervert uses me as a wanking aid. Eventually it's our stop and we leave the train. I run ahead, crying at this point, pushing through the younger girls to get away from this man. I didn't look back at him. I just had to get out. Leaving the train, after it was obvious that I was crying, I refused to tell anyone why. My friend stopped me and I turned away. She laughed. "What's that on the back of your coat? It looks like someone spit on you." I threw that coat in the bin, there on the platform. I never told anyone what happened, and to this day, my mom still teases me about losing my brand new special coat. I would give anything to go back in time and knee that man in the balls so hard that his grandkids cried. So it's 7 a.m. and I'm idling in a McDonald's parking lot until sunrise. The past few days with an escalating prowler have finally driven me out of my home. I, 25 female, live alone and on the ground floor of some cute condos with lovely neighbors. I work nights, but with the pandemic, work has been scarce. Naturally, I'm used to staying up late. 4 nights ago at 2:30 a.m., I was watching TV in the living room and my dog started growling out the window. She only does this when someone or something, it's usually a cat or raccoon, is on my patio. I assumed it was an animal outside until I heard what sounded like somebody trying to open my door. I sat still and listened for more noise because I just couldn't believe that was happening. I called my mom because I'm feeling weirded out and then peek out through my blinds. All closed, by the way, to see the gate to my patio is wide open. I know I shut it and the wind doesn't ever blow it open. I'm still on the phone with my mom and I get the genius idea to go show whoever it is that I'm not scared and go latch my gate while making my presence known. I go outside and there is a man on the walkway near my patio entrance. He was walking away until he heard my door open. He fully turns around to face me and stops staring. Average looking white dude. Hoodie up, hands in pockets, no bag. Strange, as I first assumed it was just a patio thief. When he turns around and looked at me, I got a chill. Why would this thief show me his face and make a point of fully turning to face me and stare? I'm shocked and begin walking backwards towards my door to the inside. He turns back around and keeps walking away. He takes 3 steps, then fully turns around again and stops to stare at me. I went inside and stayed on the phone for a couple of hours until I finally fell asleep. I called the non-emergency police and they made a note. After that first weird encounter, I put a long and low to the ground flower pot against my patio gate so it would at least make noise if somebody opened it. A couple of nights passed and I didn't notice anyone creeping about until last night. At about 1 a.m., I heard a crashing and falling noise. Again, I call my mom for assurance and look around the house to see if anything fell. I think it must be nothing, get off the phone. I suddenly remember my DIY flower pot alarm and peek through the blinds to see yet again my gate is open and the flower pot is knocked over. He came back. I called non-emergency police again. This time they came and did a patrol of the neighborhood. Didn't catch him. Fast forward to tonight's incident. Needless to say, I'm thoroughly creeped out. I find a deal on some security cameras with motion detecting capabilities. Got to Best Buy just before closing and snagged the last pair in stock. I set those bad boys up and felt pretty safe. 1 a.m. again, I'm running a bath and on the phone with my boyfriend and get a motion detected alert for my security cameras. I assume it's just a cat because I didn't hear the gate crash. I reset my flower pot system after it was knocked over the previous night. To my horror, I see a man tiptoeing from the side of my patio towards my door, hoodie up, hands in pockets. He knew not to use the gate because it made noise last night. It was him. He wiggles my door handle. I'm absolutely terrified he is right there. He's back again. I throw on a long coat and run into the lobby barefoot and call 911. My boyfriend got here before the police and was running through the back with a baseball bat looking for this creep. Unfortunately for me and lucky for him, he didn't find him. Police didn't find him either. So here I am, sitting in a McDonald's parking lot at 7 a.m., scared to go home. It's all just too creepy and I know to trust my gut. Why would he turn around and stare the first time? Why would he come back after he knew I saw him? And why is he so determined to be here? He hopped the fence to avoid the loud noise of the gate/flower pot. What scares me most is how persistent and undeterred he seems by any of it. What will stop him? What is the end game for him? Nothing is missing from my patio. Frankly, there's nothing to steal. He never had a backpack or bag, just hands in his pockets. I have him trying the door tonight on video. I just don't know how to attach it here. Any advice? Anyone know the psychology of guys like this? What can I do? I'm also staying at a friend's house for a few days and will be monitoring the cameras closely. This happened in 2007 when I was 19. It was summer break and I didn't have to work, so I used my day off to go to a park, climb a tree and read a book. Nobody else was in the park that day. Mine was the only car in the parking lot. It was a beautiful day, so I remember being a little bit surprised at that, but it was also mid-morning on a weekday, so I figured that was why I had the place to myself. I'd been there about an hour when I heard a car pull in. This park is on the top of a steep hill overlooking a valley, and the entrance is kind of strange. You can't exit where you entered. Once you enter the park, you are immediately in the sole parking lot. There is an exit on the far end of the parking lot that circles the entire park and dumps you out on the main road. From where I was sitting and from most angles, the parking lot curves, and a majority of it, including the exit, is hidden around a bend and a bunch of trees. You can only see a small portion of the lot. I heard someone enter, but I didn't look up in time to see the car before it disappeared around the bend. A moment later, movement caught my eye. A man walked into the park. He was older but not elderly, late 50s, early 60s. I did the smile, nod, wave thing you do with strangers. He ignored me, which is usually no problem. After all, nobody owes me their time. I was a little bit weirded out, however, because although he didn't acknowledge me, he walked right toward me. I thought maybe he needed directions. Maybe he's actually heading past me to go look at the view of the valley, which you cannot see it all from the tree. But no, without saying a word or looking at me in the eye, he walked to the tree and sat down directly beneath me. I know it sounds silly, I'm sure, but there was something about his presence that really got to me. It wasn't even the silence. I can sit in silence, no problem. I actually prefer it. It was just him. He was completely motionless, like no coughing or fidgeting, nothing. He stared at the small section of the parking lot and the porta potties. He could have sat anywhere in the entire empty park, but chose to sit directly beneath the girl he was ignoring. So he could sit and silently stare at the parking lot. Why come to a beautiful park with great views and nature trails if you're going to look at the parking lot? I don't know why, but my intuition had me on high alert. I told myself that I wasn't getting down until he left. If he tried to come up after me, I thought I would win. I could stomp on his hands, push him, or whatever. But if I came down, I was vulnerable. He could grab my legs. It was too high to jump down without risking injury. Best to stay put. Thing was, I kind of expected him to move after a while. But nope. He sat beneath me for more than a half hour without so much as fidgeting. The whole time I kept saying to myself, hey, you're just being paranoid. He's just an older dude at a park. Maybe he really likes this tree. But I still didn't get down. At that point though, I was also kind of over being stuck in the tree, so I decided to smoke him out. I texted a friend and said there was a strange man near me and asked if she would give me a call. I figured if he's just a benign old man looking for some peace and quiet, then my being loud will encourage him to seek it in literally any other section of this very large empty park. If he's trying to murder me, maybe he'll realize I have a cell phone, because not everyone did back in 2007, and hopefully leave me alone. At the very least, I thought that if I waited long enough, somebody else might come into the park and see me. My friend called and asked me if I was okay, and I tried to seem nonchalant and breezy. She just kept checking in throughout the call. Is he still there? How about now? He didn't move a muscle. Didn't acknowledge that I was being pretty rude. Just kept staring out at the parking lot. I was still telling myself that I was being paranoid. My friend thankfully had the time to stay on the phone with me. We talked for about 40 minutes, and then he just stood up and left. I watched him disappear around the bend in the parking lot. As soon as he was out of earshot, I told my friend he had left, and we left my paranoia. Yeah, she teased. Some creepy old man in the park scared you by sitting. I felt so silly acting like I had. At that point, our fake conversation had turned into a real one though, so we stayed on the phone. I hadn't seen her in a couple of months since college had let out for the summer, so we had a lot to catch up on. Outside of the awkwardly fake small talk we'd made for the past 40 minutes. I was in that tree for another 30 minutes and stayed on the line as I hopped down. I gathered up my stuff and walked to the parking lot. I turned the bend and stopped. No one else had come into the park, but my car wasn't alone. Parked opposite, it was a black, windowless 16-passenger van, and in the driver's seat, the older man. I felt frozen. I said to my friend, "He's been waiting in the parking lot this whole time." And she yelled, "So what are you waiting for? Get in your car." That got me moving. I ran to my car as fast as I could, locked my doors, and watched him in my rearview mirror. I started my car and he started his van. I reversed out of my spot, he reversed out of his. I went toward the exit, so did he. I drove like crazy out of that one-lane road out of the park, despite the speed limit being 15 because of all the wildlife, and I'm still thankful I didn't hit a deer or an animal or someone. He kept up, but I lost him on a bend and made it to the main road. I watched my mirrors the whole way home in case he was still following me. I looked over my shoulder for weeks afterwards, worried that he had my license plate number. Basically, I think I got away from my would-be kidnapper by being patient and annoying. Always trust your intuition. Once, when I was about 13 or 14, I got home from school and was home alone. I was kind of an anxious kid, and this was before cell phones were common. About 2002, I think. I called my mom at work a lot. This involved calling the security desk, and they would come get her off the factory floor. And she told me that I couldn't call her at work anymore because she could get in trouble. Previously, I would call about things like, "When are you coming home?" and just to make up stuff to talk about because I was bored or lonely, so I get it. Recently, my mom had purchased on credit a big flat screen TV and stand from Best Buy. And we had spent tons of time treating our living room like a movie theater. We had over 200 VHS tapes. We lived with my grandma while I was growing up, in a basement apartment. It was a walkout and had a full kitchen and bathroom, while grandma lived upstairs. I came home on the bus and noticed that my grandma had left the garage door open. She was a little forgetful sometimes, so it was something she did from time to time. I went straight to the basement from my garage and into my room. I remember looking around like, dang, I thought I just cleaned up in here, and it's a mess already. I was a bit of a slob as a kid when it came to my room though, so I didn't think much of it. I was only in there for a minute or so before deciding to go watch some TV. I got to the living room and it was gone. Now, I'm not the brightest crayon in the box when it comes to real life stuff at this age, so I'm mostly just confused. I honestly believe at this point that the TV is broken and my mom sent it to Best Buy or something to be repaired. I go upstairs to my grandma's house to use the phone. Our phone line downstairs we only used for internet at the time. I called my mom at work, knowing she's going to be a bit mad, and she is. It went a little bit like this after they brought her to the phone. What? Sorry to call, I was just wondering. Where's the TV? What are you talking about? It's downstairs where it always is. No, it's gone. Is it in the shop? That's when she got serious. Are you home alone? Is Grandma there? No, she's gone. She left the garage door open when she left. That's not good. Go lock yourself in the bathroom. I'm coming home. At this point, I hear footsteps running loudly up our basement stairs. The access to the basement was through the garage, the same as the access to the upstairs. I scream and drop the phone, corded wall phone, running to the back of the house where the bathroom is, slamming the door, locking it, and opening the bathroom vanity drawers since the door opened inward and it wouldn't open with the drawers out. My mom called the police and rushed over. Our house at the time was set up in such a way that we shared an entrance with the parking lot, so I'm assuming whoever was robbing us was parked over there, which is why I didn't notice any cars and they got away so fast. My room was trashed. My mom's room was trashed, and the TV and fishbowl full of change were gone. The scariest part to me was not just that I was downstairs alone with the person, but that I was in the same room. The basement was a one-bedroom with a huge living room. My mom had cut the living room in half with a big entertainment center, which the TV was in front of, but she had no door, only a wide opening to one side, so while I was checking out the TV, somebody was on the other side of the entertainment center, going through my mom's underwear drawer. How do I know? Because they stole all of her underwear too, except for one pair that was on the stairs when the cops got there, and it wasn't there when I went downstairs when I got home. Actually, my mom always said she thought it was a woman who robbed us, because she assumed that she took all of her underwear and swimsuits, same drawer to wear. I don't agree, although she could have been protecting her own feelings or mine at the time. Cops never found our stuff, and it took 10 years before my mom got a big TV like that again. I'm from a big city, but when I was a kid, my family always spent weekends at my grandparents' small farm out in the countryside. I used to think the middle of nowhere was totally safe, but this messed me up. I was 14 at the time. My parents and grandparents left to go to a bigger town to buy a bunch of stuff because the next day the whole family was going to come over to celebrate my granddad's birthday. I don't remember how long they were going to be gone, just that it would take a while. I stayed behind by myself to play video games and totally lost track of time. The place was super isolated, down a long dirt road, so it was always very quiet. But at some point the dogs started barking like crazy toward the front gate. They sounded really mad, which wasn't normal. I looked out the window and saw a car stopped at our gate. I don't remember the color because it was covered in thick red dust from the road, but I knew the exact model. It was an old beat-up sedan. I recognized the shape instantly because my older cousin had that same exact car model at the time. A guy got out, opened the gate. We never locked it during the day and started walking toward the house. I went to the front veranda to see what he wanted. I thought he was just lost. But then he got close. He didn't look lost at all. He stopped near the steps, looked me up and down, and then looked straight at the empty space where my dad usually parked his truck. He asked if my dad was home, saying something about a fence job or some repairs. I don't remember his exact words, just the excuse. Since I was a city kid, I knew better than to say I was alone in the middle of nowhere. I lied and told him my dad was inside sleeping and I would go get him. The guy just stood there. He didn't move or say anything. He tried to look past my shoulder through the open door into the dark house. Then he looked at me and said, "Are you sure? I don't see his truck." My stomach completely dropped. He knew I was alone. I said, "Yeah, it's parked in the back shed." And before he could say anything else, I walked inside, slammed the door and locked it. We didn't have cell service out there back then and no internet. I was terrified. I grabbed my air rifle that I used for blinking targets around the farm, ran into the bathroom, locked the door, and just sat on the floor waiting. I knew I couldn't do much against a grown man, but it was the only thing I had to defend myself. I don't know how long I stayed there, but it was pure torture. The house went completely silent, and I couldn't hear if he was walking around the veranda or trying to get in through a back window. Finally, I heard his car start up and speed away on the dirt road. I waited a while longer before I even dared to open the bathroom door. When my family got back, I told them everything. My dad was furious. My granddad called some neighbors, and turns out that same old sedan has been idling near other houses around that time. A few days later, one of those places was completely robbed when the owners were away. But here's the worst part. Years later, my granddad called my dad to tell him about a news story from that same region. The police had finally caught a duo of thieves who were doing some armed home invasions on isolated farms. They weren't just stealing things when the houses were empty. These two guys were actually tying families up, beating them and holding them hostage for hours to steal trucks, tools, and cash. Sadly, since most of these farms were located so far away from everything, it was extremely difficult for the police to catch them or even get there in time. The news article online showed the photos of the two guys and the car the police took from them. It was the exact same beat-up sedan. When I saw the face of one of the guys arrested, my blood ran cold. It was the exact same face, the guy who stood on my grandparents' veranda looking for my dad, while his partner was probably waiting for him in the car. My family was completely shocked. My mom actually started crying because she realized how close I came to a nightmare. If I hadn't lied or if I hadn't locked that door immediately, I don't even want to think about what those guys would have done to a 14-year-old kid, alone in the middle of nowhere. So, guy in the old sedan and your partner, let's not meet again. I lived by myself after my sophomore year of college. In my third year, I lived off campus in an apartment complex that was gated and required a key to enter. Most of the residents were students. A few families lived there too. Brian was a kid who lived with his family there. I saw him around when I would go to do laundry, and he liked talking to me. He was in 5th grade that year. He would talk to me and we would chat while I did my laundry. He would tell me about school. It was nice. It kind of made me think back on when I was in 5th grade. He used to ask me what was going on for me. I usually said I was studying. One day he asked me for my email address. He said he started writing stories and he wanted to send them to me. It felt harmless and wholesome. I gave him my email address. He started sending me these little horror stories. There were abandoned houses, killer clowns and stuff like that. While I was writing this, I just remembered that this was around the time we had a clown problem and there were reports of clown attacks. I respected that he had a hobby. I didn't always respond to his emails, but I always mentioned something to him when I would see him. Then he invited me to his elementary school graduation. I was in the middle of finals. I also didn't want to give up a whole Friday morning, so instead I sent him a Hallmark card congratulating him. I thought that would be sweet enough. The next time I saw him, he did not seem happy. He said something like, how would it have only been an hour, and he had seen me spend longer with my friends. I didn't really know what to say to that because he kind of had a point. I think this really crossed a line when he asked me to get dinner with him. He said, just me and you. I said, I don't think so. But he kept pushing, saying things like, I just want to get to know you better. Even crazier, he was doing this while his mom was there. His mom could hear all of this. I thought she would intervene, but she didn't. She laughed. When your 11-year-old son is pressuring a college student to go out on a date with him after she has already said no, this is a great moment for a parent to step in and help enforce boundaries. I wasn't in that apartment for very long after this. I had one summer session that ended in August, and then I moved to a different place for the next year. I kept my distance. I didn't want another invitation to anything. I gave that kid one-word answers. I avoided eye contact. I also blocked his email address. After I moved out, I didn't hear from Brian for a few months. Then around October, I started getting anonymous letters sent to my new address. I opened the first envelope and the note said, "It is so easy to follow you. Can you hear the footsteps behind you?" I felt nauseous. I am uncomfortable even remembering that moment now. Then I got a second letter that said, "I know what you did. It is funny how you think it is over." I had read enough of that kid's stories to recognize his writing when I'd see it. This was the way the characters in his stories might speak. I knew instantly that he was the one sending me these letters. I felt ridiculous calling the police, but I did. Imagine calling the police and telling them that an 11-year-old might be sending you anonymous threatening letters. The police told me there was nothing they could do because no laws had been broken. They could not trace the letters. They also said these letters were more common than some people realized and that there was no concrete evidence to believe they were from that kid. They also told me that sometimes these kinds of letters come from senders that the recipient had never even met before. I guess the police were right. There was no way to prove it, but I know for a fact that kid sent me those letters. There was never a third letter. I never heard from him again. I think he moved on to something else. I wish the cops had taken it more seriously, but I understand why they didn't. It is hard to investigate a situation that does not have any evidence. I work at one of those pack/mail and print facilities. One of our services is that we have mailboxes available for rent, sort of like a P.O. box. Throughout the years, I've had some major creepers who have rented these mailboxes. Lots of people are renting a box for several years ahead of time while they serve jail time. Lots of sex offenders. This story is about one guy in particular who I referred to behind his back as Stanky. Stanky is a play on this guy's last name and the fact that he always smelled wretched. He either reeked so badly of cheap cologne that you had to squint your eyes to keep them from burning, or he invaded your nostrils with such an intense and completely unhindered body odor that you were left wondering if he might have bathed in some spoiled food. He was quite literally a greaseball, gelled up hair and oily face. I always feel compelled to mention that there was a man in his mid-30s who wore Ed Hardy and Affliction gear like it was his job. He either pulled up to the store in the tow truck he drove for a living or his beloved Harley. From the first day I met him, I had a bad feeling. However, for some reason or another, I just brushed it off as, ew, what a nasty creep. He would come in every few days and claim that he didn't have the key to his mailbox and ask me to fetch his mail for him. This required my petite self to scale a low shelf in order to reach his mailbox on the top row. He often would peek around the corner to watch me during this process and have a good laugh at me. I guess he thought he was flirting. After a couple of weeks of this, I put an end to the mail fetching and cut him a new key. Sometimes he would come in and need a postage stamp, or make a single photocopy, or even ask a question he already knew the answer to, such as, "Do you have a fax machine here?" And he would linger and stare a little bit while smelling up the place. Eventually, he cornered me and another female coworker to make his move. "Would you lovely ladies like to go to this concert with me tonight? I've got a couple of extra tickets." I politely informed him that I had other plans. When he persisted, I told him I was not a big fan of live music. Total lie, I'm actually a musician. He then accused me of being one of those people who only listen to Marilyn Manson. I didn't bother correcting him. I just agreed. I said Marilyn Manson made great music, and that I didn't care to discuss it any further. Nothing was seen, nor heard, nor smelt from Stanky for a few weeks. Then one day, he rides up on his Harley with this really young-looking girl in the back. Hopefully she was 18, but she looked 15 or 16. They walk in the store together, completely groping one another to check his mail, and then retreat back to the parking lot. Stanky gets on his bike and the girl straddles him, and they start making out and fondling each other intensely within full view of everyone in the store and people driving past on the busy highway. They eventually leave to go be nasty in private. Gross. Shortly after that incident, I made the enormous mistake of perusing around the sex offenders registry. Guess who I found? One count of aggravated voyeurism / peeping in 2002. One count of committing a lewd act upon a person in 2007. Great, so now it's official. He's a convicted creepster. This obviously made me feel way more uncomfortable about him, but for some reason, I just felt this kind of sense of security within the walls of my job. I was rarely alone in the store, and I just thought, you know what? Could he really do anything? He wasn't in the least bit threatening to me. Just weird and gross. Plus, I mean, if he got too mouthy, I could always just shout, "Hey, I know you're a sex offender, asshole," for everyone to hear. So a few days later, he comes into the store again smelling bad. Not just body odor, but the BO of someone who just drank a handle of bourbon. He walks right up to the counter and leans over to my face to ask me if I'm interested in joining his new co-ed touch football team. To be honest, I don't think I've ever laughed in someone's face so hard in my life. I couldn't help it. The thought of playing touch football with this guy was too much to handle. I was laughing so much that I actually got a little bit of spit on his face that he had to wipe off as he walked out looking angry. Probably shouldn't have done that. That weekend, I was out late drinking with a big group of friends in a heavily foot-trafficked part of downtown. After the bars close on this trip, it is total chaos. Hundreds of drunks and several police cars with blue lights flashing. I am somewhat stumbling down the sidewalk, sort of lagging behind my friends. Then who do I see? Of course, I try to do the whole put my hand next to my face, maybe he won't see me thing, which didn't work. As I get closer to him on the very crowded sidewalk, he immediately recognizes me and starts yelling, "Hey girl, what's up?" To which I don't answer and I try to pass him by. He doesn't like this and grabs me by the wrist and yanks me violently toward him. I don't like this at all and try to pull away. He gets both of his hands around my wrists and pulls me up against him chest to chest, pinning my arms behind my back. He gets all on my face, asking me over and over why I didn't want to stop and talk to him. How are you going to blow me off like that? Act like you don't know me. All the while I'm struggling against him. After the 2 seconds it took for the shock of being grabbed to wear off, I started yelling. Pulled away, kicking and screaming, every filthy obscenity in the book. After I made a huge scene, somebody came up behind him and clamped a hand on their shoulder. I didn't really see how or why, but I was released and I ran to catch up with my friends who never even noticed I had been briefly missing. I haven't seen him since that night, That is, in person anyway. I saw him on the front page of our local newspaper a couple of weeks later with allegations of assault. Trust your instincts with people. If they seem shady or creepy or violent or unstable the first time you meet them, it is probably for a damn good reason. Trust yourself and take care of yourself. In the interest of keeping it simple, I will paraphrase and modify some details and condense as much as possible. I wish to keep the other party involved as anonymous as possible. A little over some 10 years ago, I met a woman online. Finding common interest, yet great distance, made a lot of daily email. Being the typical dumb guy, I was flattered when she offered to travel across country to visit at her own expense. She was younger than I, and my fear of my own advancing years and potential solitude seemed to be at a reprieve. Skipping through many chapters, she moved in with me after a year's time. In the beginning, everything was great, but there was always something not quite right with her. I found myself making excuses more frequently. I became more secluded and withdrawn from family to please her. She had a lot of weird mood swings. I found out more of her history. She had psychiatric care before and had been on medication for years, then stopped taking it after telling me in a big confession. Each day is getting progressively worse over time. Severe bipolar manic depressive. Oh man. I have plenty of doctors of my own after a car crash in the late 90s. One is a pain clinic. My job has a special license and, to keep it, a clean record. In knowing this, I got blackmailed on a daily basis to get pain medication from me with various threats that would send me to jail. After all, the guy is always the evil abuser, right? And the woman is always the victim. Despite reality. In the last year of it all, we both went to jail twice, as I got attacked when I said no. The gory details fill a phone book-sized volume in small print, but I will spare you. She is gone now for good, back to where she came from, and charges were dropped for both parties. I never could get her to just go to a doctor of her own. People will second guess me and judge me. My own parents still do, asking why I was so stupid to stay with her for so long. How could I put up with it? I almost lost everything I had. It's amazing what the mind can put up with and what extremes you are willing to go to when you keep justifying the motives. It gets more and more insane until you do not recognize yourself after a while. Although I am deeply saddened over the reported state of her continued untreated mental condition, other than health, I am very happy in general about life itself. I just had a surgery called a spinal fusion. After being hit over the head with a frying pan lid, both arms were getting numb. That is now better, so it's all looking up from there. I have heard love described one time as putting up with someone else's crap, even to the point that it almost kills you. If you meet someone online, just leave it like that. You could die. (1996). I lived in Astoria and Ravenwood's houses. In the 90s. I was friends with the mailman, who was a really cool guy. His name was Rich. What happened after New Year's was crazy, and for months I saw this man deteriorate into a killer. Rich was an all-around cool guy. He was a good-looking, charismatic mailman who delivered mail around our neighborhood. His baby's mom lived in my projects and Ravenswood houses. He would say hi to everyone, and on Christmas, no matter how poor people were, they often left him a tip in cash because everybody liked him. Rich had a dark side to him that involved a fight where he beat his baby's mom and got a restraining order. He broke her orbital bone during an argument. During that year, his girlfriend would often walk around with 2 black eyes or a swollen cheek. He was beating her. He didn't show up for 2 weeks because of some departmental procedure, suspending him till they found out what the case was about. I saw him 2 weeks later, and Rich was less cheery. The new year brought him a child support garnishment for his kid and legal problems, not to mention problems regarding custody. A few months passed, and I saw him staring into the distance at the hot sun. He didn't look too good. His long stares would be longer and longer, and it would take his name being called 3 times for him to respond. Everybody around the way heard he had broken a court order and beaten his girlfriend again. Rich was not the same cheery, charismatic man we saw, but something darker. He stopped saying hello to people. One day, coming out from work, I see a Telemundo truck along with Eyewitness, News Channel 7, and an NY1 news van. Rich killed his wife and 7-year-old and 13-year-old stepsons. Both heads were chopped off. Both of them were in the closet. They lived 2 buildings down from me, and my friend was their neighbor. Cops sealed off the building. After detectives left the crime scene 2 weeks later and everything was concluded, we then snuck in through my neighbor who lived next door. All the action took place in the kitchen. It was like blood was dragged from the living room to the bedroom. The bedroom had a broken door, and yet we did not go inside. This was before the crime scene cleanup came. I had nightmares for weeks. For a week, the boy who lived in my building, who was 7, was friends with the rich kid. The kid had become traumatized after he heard about his friend's death. His mother encouraged me to talk to him since he looked up to me as a big brother. I remember he asked me, "Why do people hurt kids?" I could only say, because they are sick in their heads. He cried in front of me, and I tried to comfort him. From that point on, I had trouble sleeping for a while. Going to the actual murder scene made things worse. I will always remember a blank stare when I joked around with him. It was like he was staring through me. So, in case anyone has heard or experienced something similar, this happened around 2005 to 2009 in San Diego, California. I don't quite remember my exact age at the time it happened, but I was probably 9 to 12 years old. It was a boring night, so my mom, little sister, and I decided to go to Walmart just to get out of the house. This particular Walmart shares the same parking lot as a Kohl's or Target. As we were walking around in our PJs in the store, a lady approached us and complimented my sister and me for being so cute and pretty. She proceeded to say that she works for a TV network and her job is to scout and cast families for the reality show. She asked if our dad was in the store with us, and even though we didn't have a dad, I lied and said he was at home for my mom who doesn't speak English. I didn't want to say he was in the store in case she would ask to speak to him. The lady looked quite normal, friendly, and kind of bubbly, continued to compliment my family for being beautiful. As she was talking, I translated it to my mom, and we all felt flattered but skeptical by her compliments. Then she said that she would love to cast us if we would follow her to her house so she could properly film everything to submit to the company. That was the moment I started averting my eyes to check the shelves for hidden cameras. During this time, family reality and prank shows were really popular, so it made the whole situation feel a bit more plausible that we were either being really scouted for this or it was a hidden camera prank. I was leaning towards it being a prank because we were 1, boring people, and 2, weren't particularly so pretty and beautiful as she claimed. Even though I was young and so I didn't feel an immediate danger talking to her in the middle of Walmart with my mom present, I knew it was pretty ridiculous to follow a stranger to their house, especially late at night. I then politely declined her offer, which she asked a few more times before telling us if we changed our mind, we can find her in the store. When she left, we checked up and down the aisles for camera crews or hidden cameras because her whole reality show pitched to a first gen. The family nearby seemed unbelievable, and it can only be a prank, we thought. I also noted to my mom how it was odd that we didn't even notice her following us earlier when we walked every aisle and she just came out of nowhere. As a kid who watched a lot of true crime and forensic shows, like Forensic Files and CSI, I told my mom what if she was trying to lure us into a trap. When we follow her home, there could be more men there, and what if they kill us or traffic us? We were probably easy target since we were only 3 women, 2 being kids and immigrants. My mom also thought it was weird, but instead of going straight to our car, we waited for some time to pass in case the lady/her people would follow us to our car and home. To this day, sometimes this encounter would creep its way out of my memory bank and make me wonder, what if we followed her that day? What did she have planned for us? Was she one of those bad women you hear working with others in order to lure other women and children? Has she done this before, and was she successful with other people? I hope nobody was harmed from her scheme. Germany, 2014. After 2 years of stagnation, I decided to do something with my life, and despite my parents' opinion, I moved out. I also decided to continue my education, but in order to do so without help, I had to start 2 jobs. That's how I ended up in the basement with my roommate Ryan. The whole house belonged to his parents and had 2 floors plus a basement. The second floor was occupied by an older couple. The first by a woman who I saw twice during my whole stay. The ground floor was empty. Honestly, living there was awful. Even without the older couple fighting, our ceiling was constantly leaking, and the windows were in a place where people could access them from the street. They would often stare at what we were doing. We had drunk people peeing on our windows or kids trying to take something off the windowsill or get in. Summer was a nightmare. But after 2 or 3 months, I was so tired that I stopped caring. You want to watch me undress in my own room? Fine. Another colony of spiders in our bathroom? Well, I guess my arachnophobia is cured. Time for a bath. Ryan taking my stuff without asking? Who cares? 2 years later, it's 2014. August, and I'm sleep deprived. But I finally have a week off. No studies, no work or responsibilities. Just some good rest. So I lie in bed and sleep all day, but around 4 p.m., I start hearing sounds. Lots of shuffling, slamming doors, and quick footsteps. Before I was fully awake, the door to my room opened. Someone grabbed me and started shaking me, saying, "Get up." Okay, I opened my eyes. My first and only thought? Ryan. This man looked nothing like him. Ryan had long black hair, was very thin, and always wearing a green hoodie. This man was much taller, more muscular, and bald. But yeah, my brain saw all of those differences and still thought, Ryan. I remember saying, "What? Can't you see I'm trying to rest?" And then I turned on my left side. Ryan didn't leave though. He tugged me again, still saying get up. I said no way, and then "I don't care what you did this time, get out." Though it was probably a lot less coherent and understandable. Well, Ryan left, and I heard him moving around our house for a while and making noise. Then I fell asleep. 2 hours later, Ryan wakes me up again. He's panicked and basically asks if I'm okay. I'm like, "What now?" Our kitchen and Ryan's room were destroyed. We also lost our laptops, my phone, Ryan's games, and manga. Some food from the fridge, and for some reason, my notebooks and a cheap Bulbasaur figurine I kept on my night table. After this, police quickly arrived, and thanks to the neighbors and their camera, we had footage of a tall bald man entering our property after 3 p.m. Spending a while hanging around the front, and then going to the back. The police were not happy to hear my part of the story. They looked at me as if they were wondering how I managed to survive so many years. Ryan's parents were even less impressed. They spent days complaining about me and making up a story about how I should have bought and protected the house. My parents tried again to convince me to move back, when after 3 weeks the situation only became more irritating. I packed my bags and actually did it. After that, I had a few conversations with police, but as far as I know, the burglar was never found. I met Frank a couple of years ago through mutual friends. We all would hang out at school between classes. Now, when I first met Frank, I thought he was a little bit weird because he was 35 and only hung out with my friends and me, who were all 18 years old. Well, as the years passed, we had multiple classes together and we became friends. He was a little off, but hey, that's just good old friendly Frank, right? Well, as luck would have it, I got a job with him where he was basically my boss. One day, we were alone working, and I told him how happy I was that I had just broken up with my horrible boyfriend of 3 years. I guess that was a mistake. Right then, he took off his wedding ring and put it in his pocket and gave me a wink. When I left that night, he gave me a hug that was a couple of seconds too long and told me something like he would watch out for me now. The next day, there was a knock on my door. Nobody ever comes to my house, and I live in the country, so I was honestly a little bit afraid to answer it. I opened the door, holding back my huge Rottweiler, who was barking like a madman. And it's Frank. He knows where I live because he picked me up for work when my car broke down before. He has flowers and chocolates and a toy race car. I quickly tell him thanks and shut the door. I still have no idea why he gave me the race car, so don't ask. Later, while I'm at job number 2, I get a text. Hey, I'm really happy that you're out of that relationship and we are working together. I know we have had some sort of mutual feelings for each other for some time now, and I feel like now is our chance. Being around you makes me feel young again, and I want that feeling forever. I have separated from my wife so we can pursue our relationship. This is great, see you at work. What the heck? I started shaking and felt a little bit sick to my stomach. I never gave him any reason to think that I liked him any more than a friend. In fact, the whole time I knew him, I was in a relationship. I stopped showing up to job number 1, and that is when the calls, texts, and emails came flooding in. I really need you at job number 1. Please come back. I'm sorry if I offended you. I thought you liked me. I divorced my wife for this. Please call back. I sent him one last email that clearly said he had completely creeped me out and I wanted zero further contact with him. I did not want him to contact me in any way. I asked him to please just leave me alone. He still sent me a few more texts, left a few more voicemails, and he actually still emails me every now and then. A week later, he comes into job number 2 with yet another box of chocolates. Frank, I'm not sure if you got any of my texts or voice messages or emails, but you should really come back to job number 1. Me, I already made this perfectly clear, Frank. Do not contact me. Please leave and I'm calling security. So he left defeated. Fast forward a month and we had an event going on at work where the radio station came. If you donated $50, they would play a song of your choice on the radio for someone special. I was working away when I felt that horrible feeling, like somebody was watching me. I look up just to see Frank staring at me. Just then I hear over the speakers from the radio station. This one goes out to Captain Cakes from an anonymous donator. It was Blue Christmas by Elvis. I run into the back holding back tears and call security. They already knew the whole situation with Frank, so I just updated them. And they went and stood by him until he felt uncomfortable and left. Frank still likes to walk through my work every now and then, but security will do the same thing every time. The last time I saw Frank, I was out to dinner with my dad, a former police officer who knows the whole Frank story. Somehow Frank was seated at the table next to us and I immediately made a face like, "Look who it is." Frank notices me and smiles, then does a double take and looks at my dad. My dad is giving him the death stare. Frank's smile immediately turns into a "oh shit" face and he bolts out the door, without even getting a menu. A week or so ago, I went for my very first job interview. It was a 10-minute bus ride away and I happened to get a seat alone because it was like 10 a.m., meaning rush hours were well over. So there I was, 18 and all dressed for the occasion and looking kind of like Amy from Brooklyn 99. That's how I dressed. I was sitting there minding my own business, listening to music when I made eye contact with him. Mid-30s, dark tightly curled hair, somewhat of a small beard and a creepo-style mustache. Sloppy dress and a backpack. I didn't take any notice until I was getting off and he got off too, saying hello to me. I said, "Hi back," not taking much notice and thanked the bus driver. Straight away, this dude was on me. He began to ask my name and what my number was. I felt uneasy and creeped out, so I told him I wasn't allowed to tell random strangers that because my parents are protective. Total lie. They're actually really chill when it comes to these things. He then began this pity spiel about how he came from somewhere in India and had no friends or family in Ireland and how he was so lonely. Then he asked for my address and I noped out again, and he was saying how he'd meet my parents and they could get to like him. I instantly lied and said my interview was soon when really it actually wasn't on for another 50 minutes. but screw it. Made a good impression by being early. I came out afterwards feeling good, and this dude was freaking waiting outside for me. He began to stroll around with me and followed me into the pharmacy because I needed to buy something. He then began telling me how he worked as a chef in the resort in the village and how he would bring me for tea. I lied and said I had no money, to which he said he would pay for me because the bus wouldn't be there for an hour and we could walk down when we saw the bus arrive. I declined and said I wanted to have a walk around by myself because my friends living nearby would be meeting me. Lies. Reason? You can't see the bus stop from the resort. He seemed intimidated by the pack thing and kind of scurried off. Here's why I lied. 1. He seemed way too upfront. 2. He was smiling and laughing when he told the pay story, meaning he wasn't really sad about it. 3. I know a girl who's a pastry chef and the daughter of a baker. I've done home economics classes. Facial hair isn't allowed in hotel/resort kitchen areas. 4. That scenario is how most Law & Order, CSI, Criminal Minds, etc. start. So, cut to a while later, I'm hanging out at a bus stop, and the bus arrives. Guess who doesn't? That dude. So, to the random dude who followed me around the village, I hope we never meet again. And I really hope that no unfortunate person has fallen for your trick. This happened in 2011. I had just gotten out of a rough relationship a few months prior to this happening. My friends encouraged me to try dating again, so I caved and made a profile on the website called Plenty of Fish. I was surprised with how many messages I'd received within the first few hours. Most were just people saying hi or asking to hook up, but I wasn't looking for that, so I ignored those messages. After about a week, a guy roughly an hour away from me messaged me. He was cute, so I messaged him back. The conversation was pretty casual at first. He asked if I'd like to go for a coffee sometime. Not thinking anything of it, I said sure. He started to get pretty pushy and asked when we could grab a coffee. I told him I don't have my own car, so I would have to borrow my mom's car to meet up with him. He offered to come pick me up, but I wasn't comfortable with that idea. The next message made my blood run cold. It read, "I'm sure your hometown isn't that big. If I knocked on a few doors, somebody would be able to tell me where you lived." "Are you crazy?" I replied. "I'm sorry, but that's pretty creepy." That just made him mad. He messaged me multiple times after this. They said, "You know I have a gun. I could shoot you and make you disappear. Nobody would look for you. And you're nothing but a dirty slut. I could kill you, throw you down a well, and no one would ever find you." I was really scared at that point, so I asked him to please leave me alone. He replied with the following, "I know where your hometown is. It's not a big town. I can find you." At this point, I'd had enough and I blocked him. I reported the account to Plenty of Fish and deleted my account. I was really on edge for the next few weeks after the fact. I was afraid he was actually going to come look for me. I was a 12 or 13-year-old girl at the time living with my mom. We lived in an apartment complex in a suburban town. Our apartment was on the ground floor, but the basement was partially underground, so there were 2 meters up to my window. It was my bedtime and I went to my room to change. My room partially faced the common playground, and we lived in a nice neighborhood with not much night activity, so I rarely closed the curtains before I went to bed. I remember seeing a jogger running out on the street. Nothing strange about that. I noticed he was wearing all black clothes and a black hat, looking like the robber from The Sims. I found that funny and laughed a little bit, especially because the weather was warm. The next night at the same time, my mom is strict about bedtime, even on weekends. I saw the jogger again. Same outfit, same hat. Again, I smiled to myself as I closed the curtains, wearing my Snoopy pajamas. On the third night, a bus passed in the opposite direction the jogger was running, so I saw his face. He was looking right at me, and we locked eyes for a second. I waved before I closed the blinds. I guess the awkwardness made me feel like I had to act in some sort of way. He waved back and stopped, but I didn't see more than that because of my curtain. The next day, we went to a family party and came home late. My mom went with me to my room, tucked me in, and closed my blinds. After she left, I heard something by my window, like a bird trying to come in. I lifted my head and looked over. The curtain was definitely moving. I waited a few more minutes, but the sound had stopped. I got up without turning on any lights and checked out the windowsill. There was a piece of folded paper, a note. It said something like, "Hi, I'm deaf, so that's why I'm writing, and I think you are beautiful. Can we be friends? I see you in your room when I'm out running, but you weren't home today. Hope I can see you tomorrow." I thought it was strange. I was a skinny girl and hadn't started to develop yet. Even though I was tall, I looked way younger than I was. And he was a grown man. I would estimate him to be plus or minus 35 years at the time. The next night when he came back, he went straight to my window and waved to me. I had written a note for him as he was deaf, and I stuck it out my window for him. "Hi, I don't think we should be friends because you are so much older than me, but have a nice jog. Also, sorry to hear that you're deaf." He pulled out a pen and a piece of paper and signed for me to wait a bit. Why won't you be friends just because I'm older? Age is nothing but a number. Maybe you want to come to my place and have dinner sometime. We can just talk or get to know each other. He gave me the paper and the pen, and I responded, "I don't think it's a good idea. Sorry, besides we would have nothing to talk about." The pen and paper went back out the window and he started to scribble again. "How old are you then? I bet I've had girlfriends younger than you. And we would have many things to talk about as I am young in spirit." I got the chills when I read that, and I gave him back the paper while shaking my head no. Then I closed my window, locked it, and closed my curtain. I got back in bed and tried to sleep. Half an hour went by, then I heard the phone ring. We had a landline back then. 2 minutes later, my mom came into my room, rolled up my curtain, and looked out my window. I lifted my head and asked her what she was looking for. A neighbor just called. She said that there was a man with a phone looking like he was trying to record something through the window, but I don't see anything. I was so embarrassed for engaging in a conversation, I didn't tell her anything. But the next night he was back. This time he tried to call for me, his nasal voice trying to imitate words he had never heard. It gave me goosebumps, but I had to respond so my mom wouldn't find out. He signed for me to open my window, and I did, but just a bit, and I kept the security stopper on so it could only open a few inches. He handed me a note and a disc. The disc was sign language for beginners, and the note said, "So we'll have a lot to talk about." I lifted my eyes from the note and looked for him, but he had left. The night after, he was back, calling for me. I went to the window and he waved. I quickly opened it and gave him an envelope with the disc and a new note that said, "I can't accept this, I don't want to be your friend or girlfriend, and I'm not allowed to have boyfriends at all, and love my mom way too much to disappoint her." Then I closed the window and curtains and went to bed. He was still out there calling for me, louder and louder. In the end, it was mostly just noises that came from him. Nasal noises, angry and sad. 2 days after I was home alone, I was dancing around the house making a bowl of popcorn and getting ready to watch a movie in the living room when the doorbell rang. I had lots of relatives living nearby who came around during the day, so I just went to open the door. But there he was. He had a box of chocolate and a note. He looked even older in daylight and had a scar on his upper lip, making his mouth look weird. He tried to say sorry, but it took me a few tries to understand it. He gave me the note and the chocolate and waited for me to read it. "I'm so sorry of my way of reacting. It will never happen again. Let's just be friends." I placed the note on the box and shoved it at him while I yelled at him to get out and never come back. I know he was deaf, but I thought he would understand the situation anyways. I took a phone, cordless, and dialed the police, showing him the display and pointing to the door and yelling, "Get out." Luckily, he never came back. 4 years later, at my first job, I heard from some of my female colleagues that he was a thing in our area. He tried to get every single girl under 15 he saw. One tried to call the police on him, but they came back and told her he had misunderstood the situation, being deaf and mentally handicapped. This happened around 3 years ago. I was living with a roomie and going to school when I was around 22. I'm a female. It was a weekday evening and my roommate had informed me that she was going out clubbing and staying over at another friend's house. She had invited me, but I didn't really feel like going. Instead, I made plans to sit on my butt, watch junk TV, and work on homework. Around 10 p.m. I went to the gas station to get some candy and energy drinks. I remember that day pretty well because I had gotten out of classes pretty early and had just gotten my hair done, and I was feeling pretty confident and cute. I went into the gas station and there were 3 dudes, probably in their 20s, just lurking around. They looked like your average frat boys, and I remember that one had shaggy blonde hair and was covered in tattoos. I noticed one of them nudged the other and nodded my direction as I picked out my snacks, but I didn't pay much mind. They paid before I did and left. After I got my stuff, I walked out to the parking lot and saw them sitting in a beat-up, crappy car, and all 3 of them seemed to be staring at me. I hopped in my car and headed back to my house, which was only a few minutes from the gas station, and they started their car and followed. I didn't think much of it, figuring they were probably just heading the same direction as I was. However, I lived pretty deep in a subdivision with a lot of turns, and after a minute of pulling in and making several turns, I noticed they seemed to be following me. I got nervous since I knew I was home alone, so I kept driving past my house. Pulled out of the neighborhood and back onto the main road, and they were still following. I just drove for a while and they sped up and really started getting close. Then they started flashing their lights and actually pulled up next to me and rolled their window down. Part of me that has hope in humanity thought, what the heck, do I have a low tire or something? But when I looked over and saw them leering at me, I knew it wasn't anything like that, and I immediately began to panic. We were on a more deserted stretch of road now, and they were swerving almost like they were going to bang into my car, but I just sped up. All I could think was, should I drive to the police station? It's like 15 minutes away from here, and there are a ton of stoplights on the way. What if I have to stop and they block my car? Fortunately, by this point, I was getting somewhat close to my sister's house. She lives pretty close to me, about 15 minutes away, but in the opposite direction of the police station. My hands were shaking and I was trying to navigate the road with these weirdos speeding up and slowing down and trying to nudge me off the road, but picked up my phone and dialed my sister. She answered on the 4th ring, without preamble. I immediately asked her if Josh, her husband, was home. She sounded confused but said yes, and Josh is in the military, by the way. I knew he owned guns, and he's a good guy, even though we didn't really talk much, and I never really felt particularly close to him or anything. Well, tell him to get his gun and come out to the driveway, please. By this point, I was near tears. I dropped the phone and one of those dudes threw something, I think a plastic Coke bottle, at my driver's side window when they sped up near me. I finally saw my sister's house and pulled into her driveway. The entire house was dark, no porch light or anything. I was screwed. I misheard her. They weren't even home, and there aren't any neighbors that would be close enough to run to. The guys pulled up behind me, so I couldn't back out the driveway, and they all jumped out. They all started walking up to my car, and one of them even reached for the handle and yanked on it. By this point, I was fumbling for my phone again. Crap. Do I have a weapon in here? Should I grab my phone and try to run? Should I back over these jerks or just stay locked in the car? In the split second that I looked up, 2 things happened. First, I made eye contact with the shaggy-haired blonde dude, who was the one yanking on my door. He didn't look angry or drunk or anything. His eyes seemed dead and predatory. While I was frozen in terror, he looked cold, like he had done this kind of thing before. The other guys were trying my other doors, but I couldn't break eye contact with the blonde one who was inches from my face and only separated by a glass window. Second, I finally saw a shape move behind him in the darkness, and I heard a loud bang. All the guys stopped and looked, and my hero, my brother-in-law, stepped out of the shadows, creeping up from behind the house. He pointed his gun at them and told them to get the heck out of there. They ran back to their car and sped off, screaming profanities at Josh and me. When they left, my sister ran outside and brought me in. The driveway scene sounds in writing like it took a long time, but it was only a few minutes. Because of that and because of how dark it was, we didn't get the guy's plate number. We called the police and they came out to get our statements. They said they would have someone patrol the area to keep an eye out for any cars that were the same make, model, color, but that it would be hard to catch the dudes without the license plate number. Fortunately, nothing ever came of it. They never caught those jerks. I can only wonder what they wanted with me, what they were planning for me, or what would have happened if Josh hadn't been there. This didn't happen to me, however I did witness the incident and it creeps me out to this day. Back in junior high school, there was a popular kid named Ryan that used to bully me and tons of other people in our school. Ryan was the type of kid that thought he was the best in the world because he was the captain of the football team. The kid that bullied nerds and cheated on his girlfriends. You know the type. Ryan's father ran an automotive parts store. His specialty was paint jobs and window tint. He had many vehicles, but his favorite was a dark blue truck with orange and yellow flames on the front. It also had tinted windows and spinning hubcaps on the wheels. Ryan's father often wore the same team jersey as his son's team jersey, a red and white hat and blue jeans. As you continue listening, you will soon discover why the details of this particular truck, as well as its owner, are very important. One day on my way to my next class, I fell down the stairs and sprained my ankle. I ended up limping to the nurse's office and calling my dad to come pick me up. After that, I sat in the waiting area looking out for my dad's car. About 5 minutes after I left the nurse's office, Ryan walked into the waiting area and sat down. Bored out of his mind, Ryan decided to talk to me while we were waiting for our dads to pick us up. I guess he felt safe talking to a nerd since his friends weren't around. So I begrudgingly decided to be polite with him and made small talk. About 5 or so minutes later, Ryan looked out the glass doors and saw his father's truck pulling into the entrance of the school. Ryan said, "See you later, man," picked up his backpack and headed towards the glass doors. He was about to push the door open when he suddenly stopped and paused. When I asked him what was wrong, he explained to me that his father usually picked him up later, and that he usually parked his truck right next to the glass doors. Instead, Ryan's dad was 20 minutes early. The truck was next to the flagpoles, which were much further away, and that the hubcaps appeared to be different and didn't even spin. After a few minutes of this, Ryan's cell phone then went off. He at this point simply assumed that it was his dad calling and didn't pick it up, so he walked out the door and headed towards the truck. I decided to take a nap while I waited for my own dad to pick me up. Suddenly, I heard what sounded like an older man yelling and Ryan screaming. I looked out the window to see Ryan flailing his arms and an older man trying to pull him into the truck. Because of my ankle, I couldn't run to Ryan's aid, so I shouted to the nurse as well as to some other staff members to get help. One of the nurses immediately called the police. A couple of secretaries ran towards the truck to help Ryan. Upon seeing the secretaries running towards him, the creep shoved Ryan away and climbed further into his truck. The guy then sped off and disappeared into the intersection that led into a nearby highway. Ryan at this point was crying in pain, mainly because the guy had pepper sprayed him. The secretaries helped pull Ryan to his feet and guided him to the nurse's office. About a few minutes later, the police, along with Ryan's real father, arrived. The police, as well as an ambulance, tended to Ryan while a couple of police officers interviewed me and the other witnesses. Because I was the only student that witnessed this, the police, as well as Ryan's dad, asked me to stay in touch and hang out with Ryan, just so that he could have a shoulder to lean on and recover emotionally. So I swallowed my pride and gave Ryan my phone number. From that day forward, Ryan was a completely different person. The same person who used to body slam me into lockers was now in constant fear and used my body as a shield instead of a punching bag. There wasn't a day at school where Ryan wasn't around me. He was especially clingy and paranoid when it came to having his dad pick him up. I would have to hold his hand and stay there with him until his dad came around. It even got to the point that Ryan would call me every night to vent his fears as well as update me on what the police would find. and many of the details about this were very, very creepy. For instance, the creep, whoever he was, not only knew where Ryan went to school and where he got picked up, he even knew which vehicle Ryan's dad drove whenever he picked up his son from school. So he decided to imitate everything about Ryan's father. That's right, the creep actually went through the trouble of painting his own truck the same colors as the father's, just to fool and lure Ryan. He even dressed up like Ryan's dad. He even said to me that the disguise was so convincing that it wasn't until he looked the creep in the eye that he realized that he wasn't his father. Yet things got even creepier the more Ryan told me and the more the police department found. As it turns out, the creep also knew Ryan's cell phone number but wasn't the one who called him. He told me that the police said that the mysterious number belonged to a payphone at a nearby gas station, so the creep in the truck couldn't have possibly called Ryan. Meaning that not one but two people may have been involved in this. Despite having video surveillance, a license plate, and a description of the driver, the police never found the guy or his gas station buddy, even when the creep continued to terrorize Ryan and his dad. About 3 months after the truck incident, Ryan called me in the middle of the night, this time in hysterics. Someone had thrown several Molotov cocktails at Ryan's house. A couple of them hit and shattered a window and set a part of his house on fire. About a month after that, somebody, most likely the same creep, set fire to his father's business. Ryan and his dad moved out of the area not long after. The creep also disappeared, leaving everyone else to wonder just who he was. Was that person a disgruntled parent or relative of a student that Ryan bullied? Was he the enraged parent or relative of one of Ryan's many ex-girlfriends? Was he a parent of a rival team member? Was he a dissatisfied customer of Ryan's father? Or was he just a random creep that liked to terrorize teenage boys? The possibilities as to who this guy was and why he, as well as his accomplice, would target Ryan were endless. With Ryan gone now, I quickly found myself getting very frightened over the possibility of the same creep going after me. For a long time, I was super paranoid about the creep going after me, and subjecting me to even worse terror than Ryan had experienced. From that day forward, I refused to be picked up from school no matter how sick or hurt I was, all because I feared that some creep was going to do the same thing to me. Even to this day, the whole incident sends shivers down my spine. Okay, so I'm not even sure if this is where to post this, but I will give it a go. I'm a 27-year-old male. This happened when I was in 5th grade, so I was about 11. The whole idea of creeps and people being abducted wasn't a huge publicized deal back then. Well, at least not as much as it is now. But we lived above a bar that was very busy every night. Most of the people were nice, and sometimes they would buy us a can of pop or something. But nothing weird or dangerous ever went on that I'm aware of. We lived on a busy street though, so we weren't really allowed to leave the block unless we went over to my elementary school across the street. Side street, not the busy one. So most of the time we were stuck out in the backyard. So I'm 11, my brother Josh is 9, and my cousin Crystal is 11 as well. We were trying to play hide and seek, but it was limited. We were sort of used to the bar customers coming out the back door and going to their car, or vice versa. Nobody ever said more than hi though, and they left us alone. Well, one chick, who was probably in her 40s, comes up and asks us what we were doing. We tell her that we were playing hide and seek and it was my brother's turn. Well, my brother was very small for his age due to lead paint. So he looked like he was 5 or 6, so she comes over, picks him up, and puts him in an empty trash can. This was one of those with the lid and the locking handles. We were freaking out trying to get him out and ended up having to knock the trash can over since neither of us was tall enough to lift him out. We run up the back stairs screaming for my mom and tell her what happened. Well, my neighbor's daughter, Carrie, was there. I was madly in love with this girl, or infatuated. Whatever. But I had a crush on this girl for a long time, and here she was with her mom, talking to my mom. She was probably 16 at the time. Anyways, we decided to play in the entry room to the apartment instead. It has the doors to each apartment, and it was basically a large laundry room. A couple hours go by and all of a sudden, this woman shows up again out of nowhere. Apparently, she made a note of us going up the back stairs and remembered it later in her drunken stupor. Josh and Crystal run inside, but when I got up, I twisted my ankle, and so this woman grabs me by the arm and tries to pull me out the door. My neighbor comes running out, and her daughter grabs my other arm and starts pulling. So I get a drunk chick trying to haul my butt out the back door for no apparent reason, and my childhood crush trying to save my life. It was like magic. Carrie pulled my arm, made the woman stumble, and then punched her in the mouth as hard as she could. Next thing I know, I got Carrie with her arms around me trying to comfort me. So it wasn't all bad. But anyways, I still had to go to the doctor because my arm was all messed up. The next week, this chick came by with the police and apparently had a much different story to them, and somehow thought that Carrie and I were going to be paying for her hospital bills, but she wouldn't press charges. Well, there was 3 kids, a teenager and 2 adult witnesses that told the cops a different story about a drunk woman trying to abduct a kid. The tone of that conversation changed, and I was taken down to the station with my mom and stepdad so I could answer questions. After that, I don't remember anything ever coming of it. When I was about 22, I lived in my small college town that pretty much only consisted of the campus, followed by a strip of bars and apartments mostly occupied by students. I was living off campus, next to the main road, when I went out to my favorite spot with a bunch of friends. I'd been to this bar very frequently, and it was always the same. Rowdy college kids singing along to the music and drinking way too much. So when I saw a middle-aged man in a full suit, he immediately caught my attention. He was a few seats down the bar from where I was, and he was staring at my friends in a way that made me very uncomfortable. He had an expression as if he were staring right through her. Pure creepiness. Call it intuition or whatever you want, but I grabbed my friend and told her that we should go to the back of the bar and get our drinks later. I asked her to stay away from him for the rest of the night because I had a bad feeling about him. Apparently, the other bar goers had taken notice of Mr. Creeps a lot too. And rumors swirled around the bar that he was claiming to be a rich lawyer in town on business. Keep in mind how tiny the town was. There was not much business happening there. I asked a bartender to ask the owner if they could kick him out since many girls were complaining, but she said the owner did not want to upset the rich lawyer. It would apparently be bad for business, as if all your patrons being creeped out isn't bad for business as well. The night went on in normal fashion, and I eventually began walking home with a friend of mine. A different friend than before. Around 2 a.m. after the bar closed. The walk to my apartment was about 5 blocks along a busy strip full of bars and pizza restaurants, followed by 2 blocks of a relatively quiet area. It didn't take long for my friend to whisper to me that Creeps a Lot was behind us. Since we were still in the populated area of town, we tried to not pay any mind and assumed he was walking to another bar. But then he started following closer and closer, and we were reaching the more secluded part of our walk. Friend and I crossed the street. He followed. We began having fake conversations like, "Oh no, I left my phone. Let's turn back," and he would cross back across the street in the direction we came from and follow. This went on for a few minutes, and our pattern of walking made absolutely no sense. Thoroughly convinced at this point that he was stalking us, we went to a nearby pizza shop. Unfortunately, with it being past 2 a.m., they were closed. Creeps a Lot was standing next to us as we faked a phone call. He didn't move. Finally, my friend turned to him and said, "Can we help you with something?" To which he replied very shyly and awkwardly, "I'm just trying to get some pizza." My friend was fed up and scared and said, "Well, it's closed and you are standing way too close to us, so you can go home now." To my surprise, he just stood there staring. A group of guys came out of a nearby bar, and we ran up to them pretending to know them. Luckily, they played along or were so drunk that they actually thought they knew us. Creeps a Lot watched us from a distance for a good 10 minutes before finally disappearing down a side street. Once we were sure he was gone, we pretty much sprinted back to my apartment. This happened over 3 years ago, and it still freaks me out so much that the hairs on my arms are standing up as I write this. Never heard anything about him again, but I always wonder if after he left us alone, he followed someone else, or worse. A few short years ago, I graduated from college and, following the principles of any good millennial, promptly moved back in with my parents. Having been gone for a number of years, my first weeks back were spent reconnecting. Read drinking with old acquaintances from my hometown, in particular my best friend Mason. I come from a decent-sized city in the Midwest, and at the time, the region was being subjected to a terrible flood. Small communities in the surrounding counties were particularly hard hit, and evacuees were streaming into local hotels for the past few days. The night before this particular encounter, a surge of rainfall overwhelmed storm drains and flooded an estimated 80% of the basements in town. I elaborate here to emphasize that this flood was the talk of the state. If you weren't personally feeling its effects, you saw about it every time you opened the internet browser or newspaper. You heard about it every time you turned on a TV or radio. It was in this context that Mason and I began drinking in his parents' garage at 10 a.m. on Tuesday morning. He worked construction periodically, and his job site was currently underwater. Celebrating his impromptu day off, we knocked back a few beers before deciding to hike downtown to our favorite bar and watch the noon news broadcast. Upon reaching the front entrance, Mason's phone went off. It was his volatile girlfriend, and when he answered by explaining that he, 1, wasn't at work, and 2, was outside a bar at 11:45 a.m., well, I knew he was going to be a while. I left him to argue with her in private and entered. Taking a seat at the bar, I took note of my fellow patrons. There were a few regulars, mostly old men with their eyes glued to their drinks. A middle-aged man and woman sat silently in a corner booth. A few minutes went by and the woman got up, wordlessly from her booth, walked across the room, and despite nearly 20 empty seats, sat down in the stool next to me, placing her full beer on the bar. At first, she sat facing me, close enough that her knees were digging into my thighs. Then she began to swivel her stool. Because we were so close, she was edging her knees off my thigh in order to turn. Now facing the bar, she stared straight ahead, palms flat on the countertop, having yet to speak a word. The bartender, assuming she wanted another drink, walked over and asked if she needed anything. She said nothing and continued to stare straight ahead into the shelf of liquors stacked along the back wall. Seeing her full beer, the barman shot me an awkward glance and walked away. I mumbled a quick, "How's it going?" and still got no response. By this point, the news had come on the large television above my head, and I half watched it and kept my eye on the woman. She appeared to be in her mid-50s, and her only remarkable feature was the horn-rimmed glasses that she wore, which would have seemed out of date on my grandmother. A minute or two passed, and as I took another swig of my beer, she suddenly came to life, swiveling back to face me. She planted her knees into my thigh again with such force that I jerked to the side. We proceeded to have the following conversation. "Hi," she said, in a curt, exasperated manner that almost sounded annoyed. Hi," I responded, noticing that she was staring directly at my face. "So, are you guys from here in town, or?" "No, nothing like that," she interrupts. "Oh, are you guys here because of the flooding then?" I assume at this point that she and her companion are evacuees. "I don't know about any flooding." I point to the television above us where a reporter is doing a live broadcast from the edge of town. The flood that's been hitting here for the..." "I don't know about the flooding," she interrupts again, forcefully and without breaking eye contact with me once, not to even look toward the television. "Oh, well, it's pretty bad. My basement actually got..." "So what's your name?" James? I didn't catch yours." "Well, I don't see any woman with you." "Excuse me." "So, James, are you single?" This comment caught me off guard, and I started looking around the bar, trying to avoid her piercing stare. I could see Mason pacing back and forth outside, waving his arms in anger. "Yes, As soon as I answered yes, She swiveled her stool back to face the bar, edging through my thighs with her knees. Placing her palms flat on the table, she stared ahead for a short time, then turned towards the man in the booth and gave a quick nod. The man got up and slowly lumbered across the room, taking the booth on the other side of her. As he sat, he pulled his bar stool away from hers, leaving a gap between them. However, when he sat, he placed his arm up around her shoulders. Because his arms were short, he had to lean across the gap to keep his arm propped up. He looked incredibly goofy and uncomfortable. His other hand sat flat on the countertop next to his untouched beer. The whole time neither of them said a word and sat there staring ahead. The man awkwardly slanted to one side. A little taken back by the bluntness of the woman, I finished my beer quickly and got up to leave, and was relieved when Mason joined me a few seconds later. He walked up and began giving a detailed play-by-play of the fight that he had just endured. So she starts in on me saying I never work, and he was interrupted mid-sentence when the woman suddenly swiveled to face me again. "Are you two together?" She almost shouted this question. I ignored her and began pulling Mason towards the door, whispering that we should go. "Excuse me," Mason replied. "Are you two together?" She enunciated the question slowly, forcefully, and loudly. "This is my friend Mason," I explained, continuing to shuffle away from the couple. "And we're not gay, if that's what you mean." Mason chimed in, increasingly confused. The woman suddenly jerked her head towards Mason. "Well, I don't see any women around you." What?" Mason replied. "So, Mason, are you single?" Sensing an awkward situation, Mason tried to lighten the mood with a joke. "Well, I may as well be now after the fight I just had with my girlfriend. She's always telling me..." The woman swiveled back to face the bar and stared straight ahead. "How about it?" she asked the man without looking at him. "Will these two do?" The man suddenly turned his head to face us for the first time. He gave a quick shrug and a nod and went back to facing the bar. Once again, the two of them went silent. The man still awkwardly slanted to keep his arm across the woman's back. I walked toward the door, but Mason started asking questions. But he got no response. "Hey, lady." He tapped her on the shoulder and she shuddered violently. "What are you talking about?" No response beyond the shudder. Mason mumbled something about how weird they were and followed me to the door. As we were walking out, the woman suddenly swiveled towards us again. "Where are you going?" she was shouting. "We have to go," I said, now lighting a cigarette on the sidewalk. "No, don't leave. Stay here." The woman seemed to be struggling for words, but we walked out anyways, talking about how strange the couple was. A few days later, we went back to the bar and talked to the bartender about the couple. He said they had arrived shortly after the bar opened that day, ordered a beer each, and sat in the corner booth. Aside from their order, they hadn't spoken a word until the woman talked to me. After we left, the two went back to the corner booth and sat in silence for about half an hour, until a younger guy came in and sat by himself at the bar. The barman explained that the woman approached the man, said essentially the same thing she had to me, and she wordlessly got up and went back to the booth. An hour after that, one of the regulars, an old man who gets very chatty after a few drinks, approached the couple and tried to make small talk. Without saying a word, they got up and left the bar without ever having taken a sip from their drinks. Last night, my 13-year-old brother JJ and I were walking down to 7-Eleven at midnight. We had gone there earlier but had forgotten to grab gummy bears for our younger brother, so we headed back. It's only 15 minutes away from my house, so we figured it would be safe. JJ wanted to look around for a minute because he couldn't decide what he wanted. It was just the two of us and the cashier in the store. But there was a man smoking a cigarette by the entrance. He was only a little bit taller than me, so probably 5'5", or around that. And he had the cold, dead eyes of a shark. His hair was down to his shoulders. It was matted and very greasy. He stared at me and JJ up and down when we walked in, and it creeped me out a bit, but I decided it wasn't too big a deal. There are a lot of junkies and white trash around my area of town, and they aren't really the nicest people sometimes. We spent about 15 minutes in the store, and the man stared at us the entire time. By this point, my brother had noticed and didn't want to walk back home. I called our dad, but he was asleep, and nobody else with the car would answer, so we went to the checkout and started explaining to the cashier how we felt weird. She said that we can call the police if we want, but there's not really much they can do. JJ and I debated what to do, but the dude ended up getting picked up in this really crappy blue Jeep. The guy driving was really ripped. He looked like he could have easily picked up his Jeep, and he had a Duck Dynasty beard. They sped off, and after waiting nervously for probably 10 minutes, we thought it would be safe to leave. We walked around the opposite side of the store. It made us feel safer. Once we hit the road, he noticed that a Jeep was parked in the restaurant parking lot across the street, and he said he saw people in it. I grabbed my knife out of my purse, made sure JJ was walking as far from the road as he could without going in the ditch, and we started walking home. We weren't walking for that long when the Jeep started following us. I grabbed my brother's hand. He was freaking out and tightened my grip on the knife. I've never had to use it before, and I didn't really want to. The Jeep suddenly floored past us and turned down a side road. It made my brother feel better, but I had a bad feeling it wasn't over yet. I told JJ to get out of his phone and call the police. He refused to. My brother is a good kid, but his stepdad is a real piece of crap, and when my brother was younger, his stepdad's house was raided by the bayonets, and they pointed a gun at his stepdad while he was holding 4-year-old JJ. He also had to call the police multiple times on his stepdad, and on more than a few of them, police dispatch yelled at him for crying too much to be understood. So I told him to pretend like he was on the phone with them. As we were crossing the bridge, we were about 5 minutes away from home. Somebody honked their horn at us. We turned, and it was the Jeep. They flashed their brights on us, and that's when we took off running. JJ jumped over fences, and I followed him. We got to our house and locked all of the doors before going to the window to see if they were going to continue following us. They didn't, thankfully. It was probably just some jerks trying to scare us, but I never want to meet them again. This incident happened in the summer of 2015. I live by myself in a nice house inside a small town. Low crime, but still the occasional shady weirdo. Anyways, at work that day on a smoke break, I watched a dog get thrown from a moving vehicle. 4-lane city traffic during the start of rush hour. I ran out there, scooped his ass up, and booked it back to my workplace. He was not injured, amazingly. As a bleeding heart animal lover, I decided to take him home with me until I could figure out what to do with him. I have a large number of cats and always have. This was my first experience with a dog that I was solely responsible for. This guy was very shy. Head hung low, tail tucked, jumpy, just looking at me like I was about to beat him. I was clueless on the subject of dog personalities and tendencies. I just knew they needed to be taken outside frequently. His first night with me, we had been out about 15 times as I did not want him shitting in my house. I was having my final cigarette of the day on my porch around 10:30 p.m. The dog was on a lead, chilling under my chair as I smoked and poked about on Reddit. I see a man walking on the sidewalk that runs by my house. He kept glancing up at me before passing. Shortly after he passed my house, he stopped, turned on his heel, and approached. "Hey, can you tell me where 302 Church Street is?" he asked. I told him I would search the address on my phone, which of course was taking a minute to pull up. He explained he didn't have a phone of his own and was attempting to get to a friend's house, taking small steps toward me the whole time. Finally, the address I summoned came up. It's exactly 2 blocks north of here, right on the southwest corner of the cross street, I told him. Pointing in the direction, he kept his eyes locked on me, continuing to slowly move closer. Doggo starts growling very softly at this point. I had forgotten he was even there until now. "Mind if I take a look at the map?" He smiled sheepishly. I'm bad with directions. I rose from my seat, pointing again. It's truly just 2 blocks up this road. Just follow the road. 2 blocks. The house will be on your left. Making it very clear that I wasn't going to just hand him my phone. Well, can I call them? I need to let them know I'm coming, he said, still creeping closer. Extending his hand. No, I curtly replied. How about texting them? Pushing forward still. Dude, no. I started toward my door. Just let me see your phone. He was visibly becoming mad, clearly trying to contain it and getting way too close to my porch. As a last-ditch effort of getting this dude to screw off, I say, you need to get the heck out of my yard. My dog is protective and he will mess you up. Truthfully, I didn't know the first thing about this dog, let alone whether he had the capacity to screw someone up. I just hoped saying so would intimidate the pushy phone dude. Like I had said the magic words, Pupper springs into action. My new wolf creature from the never-ending story. He emerges like a bullet from under the chair, growling, snarling, barking his butt off. He jerks me damn near off the porch trying to get at this dude. He sounded and acted like an 80-pound attack dog, not a 40-pound timid beagle mix. I was afraid. I didn't know if the pup would turn on me. As stated previously at the time, I knew absolutely jack crap about dogs. He backed his hindquarters into my legs, almost nudging me to the door. Still carrying on, eyes locked on his phone. Dude and showing his teeth. Phone dude holds up his hands and backs off, stammers something like, 2 blocks north, yeah? And begins walking that way. I go inside, cut off my lights and peek out the window at him. He glances at my house. Assured I'm inside, turns and begins walking the completely opposite direction I pointed him in. Icing on the cake, he pulls a phone from his pocket and raises it to his ear to make a call. The dog secured his place as a member of my family that night. He is incredibly protective of me and has frightened away another creep since this incident. He is attached at my hip and has made it known that he is grateful to be in a safe, loving home, wherein he will never become a projectile from a moving vehicle. His name is Hank, and I truly believe that night would have ended very poorly for me had he not been there. This happened about 20 years ago. I was living with my parents. Our house was a ranch style with a basement. There was a bedroom in the basement that had windows that were at the ground level. Important information. So everybody was sleeping, and when I woke up, the police were there. Someone had broken one of the ground level windows and tried to get into the house, but obviously couldn't fit through the window. There was a bit of blood, and the window had books stacked in front of it, and some of the books were outside while others were on the floor in the basement. It was really scary, and I'd forgotten about it. And then today my dad mentioned it. I don't know what they were planning. They tried to get in the back door first. There was evidence of them trying to break the lock and smash off the doorknobs. It was terrifying and they never caught them. I wondered at the time if they wanted to hurt us because we lived in a regular middle-class house in a nice neighborhood with similar houses. The houses didn't seem like the type to be burglarized, except there was a McMansion and a huge house across the street. They never came back, but I was afraid to sleep because this was similar but not as bad as when my neighbor tried to break into my window. My mom's theory was that they were going to hurt us, and my dad's theory was that it was a robbery. I think he didn't want us to be scared because today he brought it up because a friend of his was robbed, and he said he didn't think it was a robbery. He just didn't want us scared. I'm sitting here shaking on the verge of a panic attack, so I'll try and write this, but if you find any spelling or grammatical errors, feel free to correct me so I can change it and bear with me. I'm a country girl. I come from a small town and moved up to a large capital city in Australia to attend university at the start of the year. Being a broke student that isn't getting parental support, I'm renting through my university and what is known as subsidized accommodation. Long story short, it's old units from random housing trust blocks that the local housing trust has given the uni. This means I'm living with some creepy people. The guy downstairs I know for a fact is an ex-con because he told me. And the guy across the hall from me is dealing in some serious drug stuff and has police and detectives knocking on his door at all hours. I've been at this unit for about 9 months, and other than being slightly scared of some of my neighbors, I've not had any problems. Until now. Another guy lived across the hall from me. It's a 2-story unit block with 3 units in the top, one for me, one for the druggie, and one for this other guy. This other guy, who I learned is named Josh, is a large man, who I'd say in his mid to late 20s. I've run into him a few times while leaving and entering my unit, and he introduced himself, so I, being the friendly and naive country kid I am, greeted him back. Other than a few short greetings I've had with this man, the only major time I've had contact with him was when we were both at a bus stop and he started chatting to me. He asked what I was doing, and I said I was heading into the city to attend church. While not religious myself, I have a religious friend who had been begging me to attend church with her once. He said he wanted to come with me one day. I thought he was joking, so I laughed and said, maybe one day. This was about 2 months ago now. I saw him a couple of days ago, and he asked me when I was going to take him to church. Feeling awkward, I said, I don't know, maybe one day, and bolted into my unit. I've been out all weekend, dog sitting for a university friend, and came home to find 2 notes pushed under my door. The handwriting was so bad I could barely read it. I don't know what to do, and I'm terrified right now. I called my friend, half laughing hysterically and half freaking out. I made her stay on the phone while I bolted down to the car, took out my small knife that I used for animal rescues, and ran back inside. I can't ring my mother because she would freak out and drop everything to make the 5-hour drive up to where I live, and she can't do that right now. She's working 5 days a week and looking after my terminally ill grandfather, and any other adults who I ring will straight away contact my mom. My friend urged me to go to the police, but while the letters are creepy, they aren't actually threatening. Would the police even do anything? So yeah, how about it, Reddit? Why don't you join me on this terrifying adventure on how to deal with a creeper? Edit. So I talked to the police last night, who said, just tell him to stop next time you see him. If he doesn't, come back. Went to my uni accommodation team, who said they could move me out immediately, and I refused because I only have 4 weeks until I'm meant to move anyways. I don't want to move out for 4 weeks and then move again. It seems like a huge pain in the butt. I've booked a meeting for Wednesday morning with an accommodation officer to file an official report. Another edit. I've talked to my accommodation officers and student welfare officers. I've had to apply for SUP exams if I fail the ones coming up. 9th and 13th and 19th. I applied for some rental properties yesterday, so I just have to wait to see what happens with that. Should know by Friday. If not much is happening by then, I'm probably going to move out and live with a friend and her parents until I find a rental. As for the creepy guy, I've avoided him like the plague. But now that I'm actually keeping an eye on things, it is becoming pretty apparent that he is involved in some drug stuff with our other neighbor. And he has had a lot of friends coming and going in all sorts of odd hours the last few days. He likes to peek out of his door once I enter my unit if he's home. I know because I watch him through my peephole. I feel like the creeper now, lol. My nerves are pretty shot, but I'm just going to buckle down and bear it for a few more days. Another update. So it's been a while since I've updated. I moved out of that place a few days ago, and I'm back home living with my mother while searching for other rental places. She still doesn't know about the drama. None of my family does. Things did get a little bit worse before I left, but not to the point that I was chased out. I got it stuck in my stubborn head that I wasn't going through the drama of moving out in the middle of exams. The day after my previous update, the 4th, Josh had a large man with tattoos up the side of his face exit his apartment and start hammering on my door. I nearly crapped myself, not gonna lie. I crept up to the peephole, not making a sound, to see if he would go away, and he did eventually, and wandered downstairs to bang on some other doors. I know one person answered the door for him, and I'm not sure what was being said. All I heard was the tattooed dude apologizing about something after a brief discussion, and then wandering upstairs to try my door again. Needless to say, I still did not answer. even though I was standing on the other side of the door, hiding from the view of the people. He eventually went back into Josh's apartment. I still don't know what he wanted, but it got worse a few hours later. All of my nerves were shot by this point, and I was listening closely to what was going on at my neighbor's unit. One stage later that night, Josh, another friend, and the tattoo guy walked out of his unit. I heard them talking and overheard that Josh was going to walk his friend outside to say goodbye, and the tattoo dude was going to stay inside. And inside for him meant sitting on the top of the stairs, right outside my door. By this time, I'd crept up to the door, feeling like the stalker now, and noticed that the man was talking to himself. I pulled out my phone, which had very little memory left on it, because I carry all my music on my phone, and recorded some of his talk. From what I can make out, he says something about, "Freaking Saturday, man. You're an idiot. That's how you do this stuff." Keep in mind, he was completely by himself. There was no one else around. I wish I'd had enough video to record what he continued to say. He started talking about stabbing someone, muttering about how he was going to do it and whatnot. I was pretty scared, and eventually Josh came back and they went into his unit. I ended up curled up on the couch, clutching my knife and trying not to make a noise for the next few hours so they had no idea I was home. I talked to a friend a few days later who said I should have called the police, which, thinking about it now, I should have, but I wasn't really thinking at the time. I did run into the creepy guy twice before I left, though. Once I was coming down the stairs, I got near the front door and he was standing right there and said, "Hello." I nearly pissed my pants and spun around without a word, walked out the back door and jumped straight into my car, locking the doors. By the time I pulled around the front with my car, he was nowhere in sight. The other time, I was talking to an old man that lives in the unit block behind me, and I saw him walking down the street in our direction. I quickly excused myself and bolted up the stairs and into my unit. But anyways, I'm home now and safe. I hope I never have to go back to that damn unit block. Upon finding this subreddit, I haven't given much thought to the various creepy encounters I've had in my life this far. I'm a young woman who is naturally very petite. I am 5'2" and about 100 pounds give or take. I am just naturally small. I am also an anxiety-induced person and am constantly on my guard around people I don't know and don't trust, which I don't trust easily. You have to earn my trust. I am friendly in social situations, just always cautious. My mom always hammered into my brain to trust my intuition no matter what. I also consider myself to be very good at picking up the energy people give off because my mom always told me to trust my gut about people and situations. This happened a few years ago. I am a college student living in a college town. Lots of young people. One night I decided I really wanted some ice cream, so off I went. As I am crossing the street, I noticed 3 people behind me. 1 male, 2 females. As I get to the sidewalk, I heard one of them say, "Who's this bitch?" But I brushed it off, yet still kept my reserve by picking up my walk. I am naturally a very fast walker, always passing people in the streets because I would rather get to places I need to go faster than slower. I was also wearing thigh-high boots at the time, which I don't know if it's relevant, but I was dressed pretty nicely. These 3 people more or less looked like they all needed showers. They also looked like drug users, but I don't know if they were or not, so it's not my right to say. As I was walking with my speed walk, there was no reason that I wouldn't have been extremely ahead of them when I reached the door. I was essentially walking my power walk, which is pretty damn fast. Yet to my surprise, when I reached the door, they were literally on my heels. This is where I felt my stomach and heart drop because I knew that my intuition was telling me these people did not have my best interest in mind. I started shopping while keeping my guard, and when I was going to the aisles I needed to go to, one of them would follow. I picked up on this fairly quickly and started weaving through the aisles in the store. Every aisle, one of them would somehow find me. When I finally thought they left me alone, I went to check out, only to find them in the line to check out as well. I knew after I checked out, I was going to have to walk back to my apartment and that they were going to follow me, which, thinking about it now, I probably would have been fine since it is a college town and I happen to live downtown. the busiest part of town, and I lived above one of the go-to bars. The police station was also right there, so if they were to try anything, they would have to be a special kind of stupid. However, my fight or flight mode was on, and I instead decided to call my roommate and good friend. Both guys have hearts of gold but will kick your butt if they feel their friends are in danger. I waited at the dining area they have and fully watched the 3 people waiting outside, looking in my direction every now and then. Finally, I was able to leave with my friends, and they just walked off when they saw me get in the car. I'm glad nothing happened, but that was honestly one of the freakiest incidents of my life. I don't know if they were going to try anything, but I think they would have seriously failed if that was the case. I'll start by saying that I have blue-green hair that is a little bit shorter than waist-length hair. This is uncommon for where I live and sometimes collects stares. Nothing out of the ordinary though. Like usual, I was taking the bus home after class. The same bus I take almost every day, minding my own business, trying to avoid awkward eye contact. A larger man with unkempt shoulder-length hair sat behind me and proceeded to breathe heavily for the duration of the ride. About midway through, he told me he liked my hair, to which I replied with a thank you and didn't try to initiate conversation. This man asked me odd questions about my hair, like how I took care of it and if it's real. He made me slightly uncomfortable, but I didn't think a whole lot of it. I started to see him every week or so. He would get on the bus and sit behind me. He would never talk to me, but once I felt him lightly touch my hair. I started to sit on the seats that were against the windows so that he couldn't sit behind me. Nothing happened until around 2 months later after routinely seeing this dude. We were nearing the bus station where I usually get off to catch a connecting bus. Fortunately, I was unable to snag a seat against the window, so he was sitting directly behind me. During his routine heavy breathing with his eyes boring into the back of my head, as the bus slowed down to pull into the station, I felt a tug on the back of my head, followed by a snipping sound. I turned around to see him shoving what looks like a long chunk of my hair and some nail scissors into his pocket. Needless to say, I took off running. Fast forward a few weeks, I stopped taking the bus at the same time of day, till one day when I had to get home earlier. Wouldn't you guess it, I saw him. Immediately, I tried to switch seats, but I still caught a glimpse of him. Normally, his oily locks would be tied into a ponytail, but on this day they were down, but with a new addition, a blue-green clip-in extension. I got married when I was 19, and my husband and I had no clue what to do with our new life together. We dropped out of college and our studio apartment was too expensive. We thought it was the ideal time to travel and have adventures before settling down. We came across a post on the internet from a man who was looking for workers on his horse ranch. He would provide all meals and lodging in exchange for labor around the ranch. It looked like the solution for us. He claimed to be very knowledgeable in trades and would teach us to build machinery, do woodworking, weld. We actually did learn to weld, which is pretty cool. The pictures were beautiful. The log cabin he built was spacious and would have a nice big bedroom. There were lots of other people in the photos, and in our correspondence with him, he always mentioned other people and referred to himself as we. He advertises on multiple platforms and everything looks really legit. We booked our flight. There was nobody else there. He was in his 60s, but mentally and physically very fit. One of the first things he said to us was, "I never judge people based on their past. Do you believe people can change?" I sure do. He seemed harmless enough. He took us grocery shopping and told us to pick whatever we wanted. We immediately got the vibe that his kindness was forced and that he was being overly generous. I'm going to get right into listing the weird stuff we noticed. He built the house himself, and his bedroom had a door to the only upstairs bathroom, which didn't lock from the inside. He would invite us into his room, and on his table was an old video camera with about 30 little tapes strewn about. He would always talk about how much he loved the Japanese and how he specifically marketed toward them, and he had a few Japanese ladies stay in the past. He often brought up people who had stayed with him before, and all of them had left suddenly and maybe unexpectedly. One day he told us to get in the truck because we were going to the city. We were way out in the country, so it was a long ride, but he was pretty excited about going. He asked us to walk around and asked young people to come with us and work on the ranch. This made us super uncomfortable. We are introverted, and it just felt very odd to approach people and ask them to get in the truck. He got upset by our disapproval. So we got out and pretended to look for people to talk to. He went to talk to people on his own. As the days went on, his welcoming nature began to give way to a very temperamental and aggressive one. I didn't really find him creepy, but intolerable. I didn't like him at all. He seemed extremely socially inept and said inappropriate things. It was also extremely apparent that he did not view women as equal or anywhere near equal to men. He had military training and was a big, strong man. Cunning. Always thinking. Now, our parents never wanted us to go. They realized it to be a potentially dangerous situation, but we thought we had done our due diligence. However, we never even thought to Google this guy's name. I get an email from my mom one day freaking out and telling me to do a Google search, and then get on the next plane home. A quick search showed his arrest record. Strangling and sexually assaulting a young woman, followed by headlines reading, "Do not go to this horse ranch. This man is dangerous." We were thoroughly creeped out and booked a flight home. We were then presented with the dilemma of how to tell the potentially dangerous man that we wanted to leave. I forgot to mention that he would tell us daily about how we could live there permanently and start a family. He would fantasize about Christmases with our future children and raising them on the ranch. We thought it was established that this was a very temporary thing, and we had families back home who missed us. This is the weirdest part for me. I made up a lie about an emergency back home, and when I told him, it was like he could see right through me. I'm convinced that he not only knew I was lying, but also knew I was going to lie about needing to leave before I even opened my mouth. This look came over him that I have never seen on a person before. He was angry but hiding it. He was hiding so many thoughts and emotions that I couldn't tell if I should be frightened or relieved. Before I finished my sentence, he said, "When do you need to go to the airport?" Monotone. Told him right now. He took us, put on his friendliest personality, and told us that if we ever wanted to come back, he would buy our tickets. He said we might be in touch. Just recently, I googled his name again and discovered a page, a forum for people who had gone to this ranch. Mostly couples like us with eerily similar experiences. They spoke about how he says not to judge people on their past, the grocery store, the bathroom, and how they heard him listening behind his door during their midnight bathroom trips, and the videotapes, and how they watched them and saw Japanese women flexing their arms. Looking through his search history and seeing nothing but Japanese pornography. They talked about how he would make rude remarks to the girlfriends about creepy rituals in the woods, which we experienced. It was like a full moon ritual inside a circle drawn on the ground. They spoke about being driven to the city and asked to jump out when thin young ladies walked by and told them to come back to the ranch. I could go on and on. He is still operational. This forum I found was aimed at gathering stories and preventing future visitors to the ranch. The police do not have enough evidence to convict him of anything. I know I left a lot of creepy details out. I didn't want this to be too long, and I'm not a great storyteller. I'm unsure whether it would be appropriate to name the man or the ranch, but the blog where all the others have written about their encounters is probably much creepier than my story. We got away with much less weirdness because I don't believe I was his type, so to speak, and he may have feared my husband. If anyone is interested, I may be able to give a few hints so it can be found. Let me just say that this was the one time my parents let me stay home unsupervised for an entire day without a much older babysitter. And so begins my story. It all started one hot, boring afternoon in the suburbs. I was spending the day with some of the neighborhood kids while our parents were at work. Although I was only 10 years old, my parents let me spend the day with the two girls that lived across the street because the oldest of the two sisters was 13. The other, my best friend Sarah at the time, was 9. We were lying out on the trampoline playing the "What do you want to do? I don't know, what do you want to do" game. Then we heard that exciting little jingle in the distance. The ice cream man. We all started scrambling out the door after the older sister, Tammy, who had the money. We rushed down the street to the waiting ice cream man, joining the group of boys who were outside playing lacrosse at the time. As soon as we walked up and saw the driver, I got a bad feeling. Something seemed off about him. At first, I thought I was being paranoid considering he had a massively wretched scar down the side of his face, but he didn't stop smiling. It was a sinister type of smile, coupled with an unrelenting gaze fixed right on us. We quickly bought our ice cream and bubblegum and left. As we were walking back towards our cul-de-sac, Bossy Tammy ordered us to stop and sit on our neighbor's driveway and eat our ice cream. She said, "Look, I've heard stories on the news of these guys stealing kids, so let's just sit here on Miss Day's driveway until he drives away." Up until this point, Tammy had a history of telling us bogus stories to try and scare us, so Sarah started whining. On any other day, I would have agreed with her, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was wrong. The ice cream truck then continued toward us, driving incredibly slow around our cul-de-sac. He was still smiling and his eyes were still trained on the three of us. When he passed us, he even winked. As soon as he disappeared around the corner, we made a mad dash for Tammy and Sarah's house. We locked the doors and then fled to her parents' room. A few minutes go by and we have all calmed down a bit and have settled onto her parents' bed to watch some terrible daytime TV like Jerry Springer or something. At that point, out of her parents' window, that faces in towards the cul-de-sac on the second floor, we saw the ice cream truck stopped outside Miss Day's house. We didn't know how long he had been there, considering he didn't have the jingle playing. He wasn't parked there very long and eventually slowly drove away. At this time, we are all hyperventilating. But before we could take a minute to recover, he drove by a third time. This time, however, we saw him get out of the truck in front of Miss Day's house and walked up towards the front door, examining the outside of the house. He had a pad of paper out and began to jot some things down. We all started panicking at this point, and Tammy yelled out, "He's writing down the address." He returned to the ice cream wagon, and as soon as he started to turn the truck around, he looked up and saw us in the window. We hit the floor like we were under fire and watched him out of his side window. He stopped the truck right in front of Tammy and Sarah's house and jotted down more on his pad of paper. As soon as he drove away that time, we saw our neighbor arrive home from work. In a complete frenzy, we ran over to her, knowing she worked at the police station, and told her what had happened. Ultimately, they found the guy along with a notepad of descriptions of each of us, the addresses of Miss Day's house and Tammy's and Sarah's houses, as well as plans for when he was going to come back for us. This guy was a registered sex offender with a warrant out for his arrest. I'm not sure how he got in that position to be selling ice cream to children in the first place. I'm a 26-year-old female with a 16-year-old brother and have lived in Queens, New York my whole life. 10 years ago, for those too lazy to do math, I was 16 and my brother was 6. I decided to take my brother to a massive street fair on a main street that stretched very far. The street was shut down. There were some scattered officers of the law and everything else was street vendors and some awesomely crappy little carnival rides for kids. A group of my friends joined us. In total, there was probably 10 of us. After having a fun-filled afternoon introducing my brother to the deep-fried goodness of Zeppoles and whatnot, we went to a pizzeria right by the fair. The place wasn't wide but was long. The booths that lined the wall on the right sat 3 people on each side, and then there was a narrow aisle and booths that sat 2 people on each side on the right. Being a half-decent big sister, I had my brother in the in total 6-seater booth in between me and a friend. We took up 2 6-seater booths and 1 4-seater. This is where things start to get kind of creepy. In walks a man and woman who genuinely looked like they did way too many drugs. They were probably in their late 50s or early 60s. We wouldn't have noticed them if it weren't for the fact that the woman was wearing a wedding dress. Long sleeves, puffy at the shoulders, and long but sort of form-fitting in a way. This dress, however, must have been once white but was now yellowed from age and very dirty. She sat with the man parallel to our booth and our other friends sitting behind them and a young couple with their 3 or 4-year-old daughter in front. The woman looked around, spotted my brother, and began talking to him. "You are adorable. How'd you like to come home with me?" My brother has always been a bright kid and ignores her, eating his pizza. "Come on, little boy. You don't want to be around these teens." I nicely turn to face the lady and ask her politely to leave us alone. She stands up and comes to our table and tries to reach over to touch my brother, when my friend stands up and blocks her. She goes and sits down and starts harassing the young couple and their daughter. After about 10 minutes, my brother announces he has to potty. The bathroom is a one-person only type deal. So when my brother stands up and heads for the bathroom, 5 steps away, the woman asks him if he'd like her to help. At this point, I tell her to F off and leave my brother alone. She tries to push past me and rush to my brother in the bathroom, but another friend is standing in front of the door, basically guarding him. She curses me out and sits down. As soon as he comes back out, I pick him up and carry him out. She's trying to grab him from me, but there's 10 of us and 1 of her. We go to the nearest officer and tell him what's up, and he runs to the pizzeria. Come to find out, she actually abducted a kid from the fair, but when the child started screaming bloody murder, she put him or her down and ran. Needless to say, Mace is my new best friend.